The night was supposed to be perfect for Ryan Mitchell. Dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, he walked into the most exclusive restaurant in New York with Vanessa Brooks, the woman he had left his wife for. Laughter and champagne filled the air. Everyone admired them, a successful businessman and the daughter of a wealthy real estate tycoon. Ryan believed he had finally won the life he always wanted. He thought he had buried his past for good. But fate had other plans. As Ryan leaned in to whisper into Vanessa's ear, his eyes suddenly froze on a figure across the room. A waitress walked carefully between tables, her steps a little slower, her body wrapped in a modest black dress that could not hide the unmistakable curve of pregnancy. Her hair, once so familiar, was tied back simply. And then she turned. It was Emily, the woman he had divorced just 7 months earlier, the wife he had discarded like she was nothing more than a burden. Ryan's heart dropped into his stomach as his eyes locked on hers. For a brief second, the restaurant around him blurred into silence. All he could see was her face, pale, tired, but still carrying that quiet strength he once ignored, and her belly, round, undeniable, proof of the life growing inside her. Vanessa noticed his expression and frowned. "Ryan, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp, but Ryan couldn't answer. His mind spun wildly. Pregnant? 7 months after divorce? Could it be his? The memories came rushing back. Their last night together, filled with anger, tears, and then desperate passion before papers were signed and lawyers tore their lives apart. Ryan had believed it was the end. He had convinced himself she would fade away quietly. But now, standing across the restaurant, Emily looked like the ghost of his past, carrying a secret that could destroy his future. Every whisper in the room suddenly felt like it was about them. Vanessa's hand tightened on his arm, but Ryan barely noticed. His chest burned with a mix of fear, guilt, and something darker, regret. The baby might be his, and if the world found out, his perfect new image would collapse. Emily didn't say a word. She simply held her tray, her eyes glistening but calm, before turning away to serve another table. Yet that one glance had already shattered Ryan's carefully built life. He realized in that instant, everything he thought he controlled was about to slip from his hands, and he had no idea how devastating the truth would become. Emily Carter had never dreamed of wealth, fame, or power. All she ever wanted was a quiet life filled with love, stability, and family. Born in a small town in Pennsylvania, she grew up in a modest home where her father worked as a mechanic and her mother ran a small bakery. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that sense of warmth shaped Emily into a gentle, selfless woman. After college, Emily moved to New York City to work as an elementary school teacher. Her life was simple, but she loved it. She adored her students, often staying late to help them with homework or buying supplies with her own paycheck when the school budget ran out. Friends described her as the girl who always put others first. But beneath that kindness was a woman who secretly longed for a love story of her own. That love story seemed to arrive when she met Ryan Mitchell. He was charming, ambitious, and full of promises. Their romance began with whirlwind dates, rooftop dinners, late-night walks in Central Park, handwritten notes left on her doorstep. For the first time, Emily felt like she had found someone who saw her worth. Ryan spoke of building a life together, of creating a future where she wouldn't have to struggle. They married after just a year of dating. Emily believed she was living her fairy tale. She devoted herself entirely to Ryan, cooking his favorite meals, supporting his long hours, sacrificing her own dreams so he could chase his career. She told herself that was what love meant: compromise, patience, loyalty. When cracks appeared, his criticism, his long business trips, the growing distance, she ignored them, clinging to the hope that the man she fell in love with was still there. The breaking point came when Ryan grew close to Vanessa Brooks, the glamorous daughter of a wealthy real estate mogul. Emily noticed the expensive gifts he brought home, the way he avoided her eyes, the sharp words when she asked simple questions. And then, one morning, she was handed divorce papers. No warning, no discussion, just cold signatures that ended 3 years of marriage. Emily's world collapsed overnight. She lost not only her husband, but also the apartment they had shared, the stability she had fought so hard to build. With nowhere else to go, she rented a small, run-down one-bedroom apartment in Queens. She returned to teaching, but the loneliness followed her everywhere. Nights were the worst, lying awake in bed, replaying every moment of her marriage, asking herself what she had done wrong. It was during those dark weeks that she discovered she was pregnant. The test shook in her trembling hands as tears streamed down her face. A part of her wanted to call Ryan, to tell him, to hope for a shred of humanity in him. But another part knew better. This was the man who had already chosen another woman. She could not give him another chance to destroy her. So Emily made the decision to raise the child alone. It terrified her, but it also gave her purpose. Every morning, as she looked in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "You are stronger than you think." She worked double shifts, cut corners, and saved every dollar. She carried the weight of both mother and father, even when exhaustion threatened to break her. Her students noticed her softer glow. Her colleagues admired her quiet resilience. But Emily hid her struggles carefully, never letting anyone see the full extent of her pain. The secret of her pregnancy remained locked away, known only to her doctor and a single trusted friend. She believed she could keep the secret forever, that Ryan would never know. But destiny had other plans, and the night he saw her belly for the first time would ignite a storm neither of them could escape. The city of New York was always alive, buzzing like a restless heart that never stopped beating. For Emily, though, it felt like two different worlds existed within the same streets. On one side were the glittering skyscrapers, rooftop parties, charity galas, and high-class restaurants where Ryan now lived with Vanessa, bathed in luxury. On the other side were her own days, quiet, exhausting, filled with the sounds of children's laughter in her classroom and the silence of her tiny rented apartment in Queens. The contrast could not have been more cruel. Ryan Mitchell had made himself into a rising star among the city's elite. Since his divorce, he flaunted his connection to Vanessa's powerful family, attending fundraisers where the champagne never stopped flowing and the lights never dimmed. He hosted business dinners at Amaretto, the most expensive restaurant in Manhattan, where each plate cost more than Emily's weekly groceries. Society pages began printing his photos again. His arm confidently wrapped around Vanessa's waist, their smiles rehearsed but convincing. To the outside world, he had upgraded his life. Emily, on the other hand, avoided those same streets. She lived in the shadows, working quietly, keeping her secret. But destiny has a cruel way of dragging people together in the very places they least expect. It happened on a Friday night, at a restaurant neither of them should have been in together. Ryan was there with Vanessa, seated at a corner table with city investors, laughing louder than usual, showing off his perfect new life. He thought the evening would end with business deals and whispered promises. Emily was there because she needed extra cash. The pregnancy was expensive. Doctor visits, vitamins, preparing for a baby on her own. Teaching barely covered the rent, so she took part-time shifts as a server. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. She didn't know Ryan would be there. If she had known, she never would have walked through those doors. The restaurant itself was breathtaking. Gold chandeliers dripped from the ceiling, and velvet curtains softened the glow of candlelight. Couples in gowns and tuxedos filled the room, each one representing power, wealth, and influence. To them, this was just another evening of indulgence. To Emily, it was survival. She moved carefully, balancing trays of wine glasses, ignoring the ache in her back and the heaviness in her feet. When she turned, her world collided with Ryan's. For Ryan, it was as if time itself stopped. The glamorous facade of his night cracked in an instant as his eyes landed on Emily. He didn't just see a server, he saw the curve of her belly, unmistakable and undeniable. 7 months. His mind raced. The timing, the last night they were together before the divorce, couldn't be ignored. The setting became the stage of a silent war. Guests continued laughing, clinking glasses, but Ryan's chest tightened, and Vanessa's smile faltered as she followed his gaze. Emily, though shaken, forced herself to continue walking, tray in hand, pretending he didn't exist. Yet she knew, deep down, that the fortress of silence she had built around her secret was beginning to crumble. The restaurant had turned into more than just a place to serve food and close deals. It was now the battlefield of past and present colliding, the backdrop where betrayal, regret, and truth stood ready to erupt. And when Emily's eyes met Ryan's across the room, neither of them could escape what was coming, because this restaurant would become the place where Ryan's perfect world began to fall apart. Ryan Mitchell was a man who knew how to play roles. To the public, he was the picture of success, ambitious, confident, the kind of man who could walk into any room and immediately command attention. But behind that polished smile was a darker truth, one Emily had learned too late. Ryan had always been hungry, not for love, but for status. He came from a middle-class family that scraped to get by. Growing up, he despised the way his parents argued over bills and envied the classmates who wore designer clothes. He swore that one day he would never feel small again. That vow shaped every decision he made as an adult. Money wasn't just about comfort, it was proof of his worth. When he met Emily, she represented warmth and stability. She loved him without conditions, something he had never experienced before. At first, that unconditional love felt intoxicating, but soon it began to feel like a cage. He didn't want to be reminded of his roots. He wanted to rise higher, faster, to be seen in the company of the powerful. Emily's modest salary, her humble lifestyle, her quiet nature, they all became irritations to him. Enter Vanessa Brooks. Vanessa was everything Emily was not. She was the daughter of Thomas Brooks, a man whose real estate empire spanned half the city. Born into luxury, Vanessa carried herself with a confidence that came from never knowing the weight of survival. She was glamorous, connected, and ruthless. For Ryan, she was not just a lover. She was a ticket to the life he believed he deserved. Their affair started quietly. Business meetings, casual dinners, stolen moments that Emily never saw coming. Vanessa, sharp and calculating, knew exactly what she was doing. She whispered into Ryan's ear about the kind of man he could become with her by his side. She painted pictures of penthouses, yachts, and influence beyond imagination. Ryan listened, hungry for every word. Emily's love suddenly felt small compared to Vanessa's promises of power. The decision to leave his wife was not difficult for Ryan. In his mind, he was upgrading. He told himself Emily would survive. She was strong, she'd find her way. But the truth was simpler. He didn't care. He was already chasing the next stage of his climb, intoxicated by Vanessa's world of glittering parties and endless wealth. Vanessa, however, did not love Ryan in the way Emily once had. To her, Ryan was ambitious, charming, and useful. He was handsome enough to stand beside her at events and clever enough to advance her father's business interests. But love? That was not in her vocabulary. She saw Ryan as a project to mold, a partner who would bow to her influence while basking in her family's fortune. Together, they became a power couple in the eyes of society. But beneath the glamorous photos and champagne smiles was a toxic bond built on greed and appearances. Ryan ignored the whispers of doubt that sometimes echoed in his mind, whispers of Emily's steady love, of the home they once shared. He buried those thoughts under expensive suits and designer cufflinks, pretending he was finally the man he always wanted to be. But that illusion cracked the night he saw Emily again. Because in that single glance, Vanessa also noticed the truth. She saw his eyes fix on the pregnant woman carrying a tray, and she understood instantly who Emily was. Jealousy, sharp and poisonous, flickered across her face. And for the first time, Ryan realized Vanessa might not be the safe haven he had imagined. Because when power, jealousy, and secrets collide, even the strongest alliances can shatter. The restaurant's golden lights glimmered like stars, but to Emily, it felt like standing under a harsh spotlight. She carried her tray with steady hands, though her heart pounded so hard it echoed in her ears. She had spent months avoiding Ryan, months building a fragile life where his face was only a ghost in her memory. And yet, here he was, alive, smirking, and staring at her swollen belly like the truth had just ripped the ground from beneath him. She wanted to disappear. But fate gave her no such mercy. Ryan rose from his chair, Vanessa clutching his arm, her eyes sharp and curious. "Emily," Ryan said loudly, too loudly. Heads began to turn at the sound of her name. She froze, every step heavy with dread. The tray in her hands trembled as the room fell into a hush. Investors, socialites, strangers, they were all watching, sensing a scandal about to unfold. Vanessa tilted her chin, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is your ex-wife? The one you said was weak?" She let her gaze drop deliberately to Emily's belly. "Seems she didn't waste much time, did she?" The words cut like a knife. Emily's cheeks burned as whispers erupted around the room. She could hear them. She's pregnant? Who's the father? Was she hiding? Every hushed speculation swirled through the air like daggers, stabbing her dignity. Ryan's face twisted with something between anger and panic. "Whose child is that, Emily?" he demanded. His voice, once intimate, now carried across the room, cruel and accusing. "Tell everyone. Whose baby are you carrying?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to scream that it was his, that he had abandoned her when she needed him most. But the humiliation was unbearable. Every eye in the restaurant waited for her response. Her secret, the one she had fought so hard to protect, dangled on the edge of exposure. "I don't owe you an explanation," she whispered, but her voice shook. Vanessa laughed, sharp and victorious. "Of course she won't say. Women like her always trap men with lies." She leaned closer to Ryan, loud enough for the room to hear. "You were right to leave her." The laughter from Vanessa, the silence from the crowd, the weight of Ryan's stare, it all pressed down on Emily until she could barely breathe. She lowered the tray to the nearest table, her hands trembling. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to escape the walls closing in. But before she could move, Ryan stepped closer. His voice dropped, but the malice was clear. "If that baby is mine, Emily, you'll regret keeping it from me." The words shattered her. She clenched her jaw, fighting back tears, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. But inside, her heart crumbled. In that moment, she wasn't just Emily the teacher, or Emily the ex-wife. She was a woman stripped bare in front of strangers, judged, mocked, betrayed. The humiliation was complete, and yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered. A quiet voice whispered that she would not always be powerless. Emily lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet Ryan's eyes. She said nothing, but the look in her gaze carried a promise he would never forget. Because this night, this very humiliation, would one day be the reason she rose stronger than ever. And Ryan had no idea that someone else in that restaurant was watching, someone who would change Emily's life forever. The humiliation at the restaurant clung to Emily like a second skin. Long after she slipped out the back door, away from the whispers and cruel laughter, the words still echoed in her ears. "Whose baby are you carrying?" Ryan's voice had been like a knife, cutting through the fragile walls she had built around herself. And Vanessa's mocking laugh, sharp, venomous, was now engraved into her memory. Emily stumbled into the cold night air, her breath clouding in front of her. The city lights blurred as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. She tried to steady herself, gripping her belly protectively as if shielding her unborn child from the cruelty of the world. "It's okay, baby," she whispered through sobs. "Mommy's here. Mommy won't let them hurt you." But the truth was, Emily was breaking. She found herself wandering aimlessly, the sounds of honking taxis and chatter fading into a dull roar. Her feet carried her through streets she barely registered. All she could feel was the weight of shame pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. When she finally reached her tiny apartment, she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face into her hands. The tears wouldn't stop. She cried until her body shook, until her throat was raw and her eyes burned. She had survived the divorce. She had endured the loneliness. But tonight had ripped her open in ways she never imagined. The man who once swore to love her had not only abandoned her, he had turned her existence into a public spectacle. "Why wasn't I enough?" she whispered into the silence. The apartment offered no answer. The peeling wallpaper, the buzzing fridge, the single lamp in the corner, all of it bore witness to her despair. She pressed her palms against her swollen belly, feeling the faint kick beneath her skin. That tiny flutter should have been a comfort, a reminder of the life she was fighting for. But tonight, even that wasn't enough to stop the crushing wave of hopelessness. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to wonder if she could do this. Could she raise a child alone? Could she endure the stares, the whispers, the judgment? Every insecurity she had buried rose to the surface, screaming at her that she wasn't strong enough. She curled onto the couch, clutching a pillow like a lifeline. Her breaths came in ragged sobs. Images of Ryan's face, twisted with accusation, played in her mind over and over. His threat, "If that baby is mine, you'll regret keeping it from me," haunted her. The man she once loved had become her tormentor, and there was no escaping him. Hours passed. The city outside continued to live, but inside that tiny apartment, Emily's world felt frozen. Exhaustion finally pulled her into a restless sleep, though even in her dreams, the humiliation replayed like a cruel film. When morning came, the sunlight streaming through the window felt almost offensive. She dragged herself to the bathroom, staring into the mirror. Her reflection shocked her. Swollen eyes, pale skin, the look of a woman who had been crushed. For a moment, she didn't recognize herself. "This isn't me," she whispered. But the mirror didn't lie. She sank onto the bathroom floor, arms wrapped tightly around her belly, tears threatening again. She was tired of fighting, tired of pretending to be strong. For the first time, Emily thought about giving up, not on the baby, but on herself. Maybe Ryan was right. Maybe she was nothing without him. Her phone buzzed on the counter, snapping her out of the spiral. A message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "You don't have to go through this alone. Meet me tonight." Emily's breath caught. Her hands trembled as she read the words again. Someone knew her secret, and they were about to step into her shattered world. Emily stared at the message glowing on her phone screen, her heart pounding. "You don't have to go through this alone. Meet me tonight." The number was unfamiliar, but the words carried a strange comfort, as if someone out there saw her pain when the rest of the world only mocked it. She debated ignoring it. After all, she had been burned before. Trust had cost her everything, but a part of her, the part desperate for hope, couldn't let it go. With trembling hands she typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who saw what happened last night, 7 p.m. at the cafe on 5th Avenue. Please come." Emily's instinct screamed caution, but loneliness and exhaustion pushed her forward. By evening, she found herself sitting in the corner of the cafe, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea she could barely taste. Every time the door opened, her chest tightened. What if it was Ryan? What if it was a trap? But then he walked in, Daniel Harrington. She recognized him instantly. He was a name she had only seen in newspapers and business magazines. The CEO of Harrington Enterprises, a billionaire known for his philanthropy as much as his ruthless success. But seeing him in person was different. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or bodyguards. He walked in quietly, wearing a simple coat, his gaze steady and kind. "Emily?" he asked softly, approaching her table. She blinked in shock. Why would you reach out to me?" Daniel took the seat across from her, his expression gentle. "Because I was there. I saw what Ryan did to you last night, and I couldn't walk away." Emily's throat tightened. Shame washed over her again. But Daniel leaned forward, his voice firm. "You don't deserve what happened. You don't deserve to carry this weight alone." For the first time in months, someone spoke to her not with pity, not with judgment, but with genuine compassion. She tried to look away, embarrassed, but Daniel's gaze didn't waver. "You're pregnant," he said softly, almost like a statement of strength rather than weakness. "And you're stronger than you realize. I know what Ryan is like. Men like him think they can step on anyone to climb higher, but I've seen women like you rise, Emily, and I can help." Her mind spun. Why would a man like Daniel, wealthy, powerful, untouchable, care about her? She shook her head. "I don't want charity. I can't be someone's pity project." Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile. "This isn't charity, it's respect. You faced humiliation and still stood tall. That's more strength than most people in Ryan's world will ever have. I admire that." Tears threatened to spill again, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from the sudden, fragile spark of hope. For so long she had carried the weight alone, but Daniel's words cracked something open inside her. Still, doubt lingered. "Why would you risk anything for me? You don't even know me." Daniel leaned back, his expression turning serious. "Because I know men like Ryan, and I know the damage they leave behind. But there's something else you need to know." Emily's breath caught. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Ryan is not as secure as he pretends. His business deals with Vanessa's family aren't as solid as he shows. In fact, he's in debt, deep debt, and the truth about you and that baby could destroy everything he's trying to build." Emily's heart raced. The humiliation, the pain, it all suddenly looked different. She wasn't powerless. She held the very secret that could shatter Ryan's empire. Daniel leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "Ryan thinks he won last night, but Emily, the game is just beginning, and you have far more power than you realize. Emily's hands trembled around her cup. For months, she had been drowning in shame. Now, for the first time, she saw the possibility of rising. And yet, Daniel's words carried an unspoken warning. Because if Ryan discovered that she now had an ally with power of his own, the fight ahead would turn into a war. For days after meeting Daniel, Emily couldn't stop replaying his words. You have far more power than you realize. They echoed in her mind like a lifeline, pulling her back from the edge of despair. For months, she had been walking through life like a shadow, carrying shame and loneliness as if they were chains around her wrists. But now, a crack of light had formed. She started small. The morning after their meeting, Emily stood in front of her mirror longer than usual. For months, she had avoided her reflection, unable to look at the pale, exhausted woman staring back at her. But this time, she forced herself to look. Her belly had grown, round and undeniable. The woman in the mirror looked fragile, yes, but not broken. There was strength in the lines of her face, a quiet determination in her eyes. For the first time, she whispered to her reflection, "You're not done yet." Daniel kept his promise. Over the next week, he called to check on her, sent groceries to her apartment, and quietly arranged for her to see a better doctor. He never pushed, never pitied her. He simply reminded her that she wasn't alone. That reminder became fuel. Emily began walking every morning, not just for her health, but to clear her mind. The city streets that once felt suffocating slowly became hers again. She held her head higher, shoulders straighter. At school, her students noticed the change. "Miss Carter, you're smiling more," one child said shyly. She realized she was. But transformation wasn't just about appearance. It was about mindset. Emily had spent too long hiding, apologizing for existing. Now she began to reclaim herself piece by piece. She dug out her old notebooks, the ones filled with lesson plans, dreams of starting her own literacy program for underprivileged children. She had buried those dreams during her marriage to Ryan, when every ambition was dismissed as small or unimportant. Late at night, she began writing again. Ideas, goals, visions for the future. Each word on the page was an act of defiance, a declaration that her life wasn't over. Still, fear lingered. She knew Ryan. She knew the way he used power to crush anyone who threatened him. But she also knew something else now. He wasn't untouchable. His debts, his lies, his image, they were fragile. And Emily realized she had the one truth that could crack his perfect facade wide open. Daniel encouraged her without dictating her choices. "You don't have to strike yet," he told her one evening over the phone. "But prepare yourself. Ryan will come for you. And when he does, you need to be ready, not just to defend yourself, but to win." The words sank deep. For so long, Emily had been surviving. Now she was learning to fight. She changed her wardrobe. Gone were the faded sweaters and worn shoes she had clung to after the divorce. Slowly, she began investing in herself again. Dresses that flattered her growing figure, shoes that made her stand taller, colors that spoke of confidence instead of fear. She wasn't dressing for Ryan. She wasn't dressing for Vanessa. She was dressing for herself and for the woman she was becoming. Even her voice changed. At school, in the market, with neighbors, she spoke more firmly, no longer shrinking into silence. She was still kind, still gentle, but there was a new edge to her tone, a quiet authority that couldn't be ignored. And with every step forward, she thought of the baby inside her. "I will not let you be born into shame," she whispered one night, resting her hands on her belly. "You will know your mother fought for you. You will know we were stronger than him." But as Emily rose, so did the storm. Because Ryan had not forgotten the look in her eyes at the restaurant, the defiance hidden beneath her humiliation. And while Emily was preparing to fight back, Ryan was already plotting a move that could destroy everything she was rebuilding. The invitation came unexpectedly. Emily had almost thrown it away, thinking it was a cruel mistake. But there it was, printed in gold ink: Annual Brooks Foundation Gala, an evening of elegance. Vanessa's family's event. Emily's hands trembled as she held the thick card. This was the kind of gala Ryan lived for, the kind of night where his entire world, investors, socialites, and power brokers, gathered to celebrate themselves. She had no business stepping foot into that world anymore. And yet, Daniel's voice echoed in her mind. "Ryan will come for you. Be ready, not just to defend yourself, but to win." That night, Emily made a decision. She would no longer hide. Daniel arranged everything quietly. A dress, tailored to her figure, elegant but commanding. A stylist who gave her hair soft waves instead of the plain bun she used to wear. A car to pick her up, sleek and black, waiting outside her tiny apartment like a chariot. As Emily looked at her reflection before leaving, she barely recognized herself. She wasn't the broken woman who had cried on her bathroom floor. She was radiant, glowing, not just with pregnancy, but with strength. Her hand rested gently on her belly as she whispered, "Tonight, we show him." The gala was held at the Metropolitan Grand, a palace of crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Reporters lined the red carpet, cameras flashing as the city's elite arrived. Ryan and Vanessa were already inside, smiling for photographers, their hands intertwined like royalty. Ryan wore his usual mask of confidence, but deep down, he was restless. Since the restaurant incident, Emily haunted him. The thought of her baby, their baby, had gnawed at his mind like a relentless echo. Then the doors opened, and Emily entered. The room shifted, conversations faltered, heads turned. In her sapphire gown, Emily didn't look like the fragile ex-wife Ryan had tried to erase. She looked powerful, serene, untouchable. She carried herself with quiet dignity, her chin high, her eyes unflinching. Even the swell of her pregnancy, once a source of humiliation, now seemed like a crown she wore with pride. Vanessa's smile cracked. "What is she doing here?" she hissed at Ryan, her nails digging into his arm. Ryan's jaw clenched. He hadn't expected this. Emily was supposed to remain invisible, tucked away in some forgotten corner of the city. But here she was, walking into his world like she belonged, her very presence a threat to the fragile empire he had built. As Emily crossed the ballroom, whispers spread like wildfire. "That's his ex-wife. She looks incredible. Is that his baby?" The rumors Ryan had fought so hard to suppress now came roaring back, louder than ever. Daniel appeared at Emily's side, offering his arm with a quiet nod. His presence was a message in itself. She wasn't alone anymore, and she had powerful allies. The sight of them together sent another ripple through the crowd. Ryan's stomach twisted as he realized people were already speculating. Was Daniel the father? Was Ryan about to be exposed as a liar and a coward? Emily didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to accuse. Her silence, her composure, was louder than any scream. She was no longer the woman they pitied. She was the woman who made the entire room hold its breath. Ryan forced a smile, but the sweat forming at his temples betrayed him. Vanessa's grip tightened, her eyes narrowing with pure venom. And in that charged silence, Emily finally looked at Ryan. Her gaze was calm, steady, unshaken. She didn't say a word, but her eyes told him everything. "You tried to destroy me, but I'm still here, and I'm stronger than ever." The gala was just beginning, but already the power had shifted. And before the night ended, secrets would be exposed that no one in that room was prepared to face. The gala reached its peak, a glittering orchestra swelling as guests toasted to wealth, legacy, and power. But beneath the music, tension simmered like a live wire. Ryan kept glancing across the ballroom, his jaw tight, his eyes betraying unease every time they landed on Emily. She had become the unspoken center of the evening. People whispered about her beauty, her strength, and most of all, her pregnancy. Vanessa sensed it too. She clung tighter to Ryan's arm, smiling too brightly, laughing too loudly, her insecurities shining through the cracks. "Ignore her," she hissed through clenched teeth. "She's trying to make a scene." But Emily wasn't trying at all. Her very existence was enough to unravel Ryan's perfect facade. At last, the moment arrived. The host invited Ryan onto the stage to deliver a speech about family values and the future of the Brooks Foundation. It was supposed to be his crowning moment, the night he solidified his place in high society as Vanessa's partner. Ryan straightened his jacket, pasted on his trademark confident smile, and took the microphone. The room quieted, expectant. He began with practiced charm, praising Vanessa's family, speaking of loyalty, trust, and new beginnings. But as he spoke, his gaze drifted toward Emily, standing tall, radiant in her sapphire gown, her hand resting on her belly. And then it happened. A voice rang out from the crowd, clear and strong. "Tell them, Ryan. Tell them about the wife you abandoned 7 months ago." The room gasped. All eyes turned toward Emily as she stepped forward. Her voice didn't shake. "Tell them about the child you denied. Tell them how you left me for her," she said, nodding toward Vanessa. Ryan froze, the microphone trembling in his hand. "Emily," he hissed, his mask cracking. "Not here. Not now." But Emily didn't stop. For months, she had carried humiliation in silence. Tonight, she reclaimed her voice. "You talk about loyalty and trust, yet you humiliated me, discarded me like trash. You stood in this very city and let people believe I was nothing. But look at me now, Ryan. I am not broken. I am carrying your child, and I will not let you erase me." Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Reporters' pens scribbled furiously, phones lifted to record every second. Vanessa's face turned pale, her glamorous smile collapsing into rage. Ryan tried to speak, but Emily's words drowned him out. "You wanted to build an empire of lies, but this," she placed a hand on her belly, her eyes blazing, "is the truth. And the truth will outlive every deal, every dollar, every false promise you've ever made." The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's carefully constructed image shattered in front of his peers. Investors exchanged wary glances. Society's elite whispered behind manicured hands. Even the orchestra faltered, strings screeching into an awkward stop. Vanessa ripped her hand from Ryan's arm. "You said she was nothing," she spat, her voice carrying across the hall. "You said she was weak." The humiliation Ryan once inflicted had come full circle. Now he was the one exposed, cornered, stripped bare under the weight of truth. Emily didn't wait for applause. She didn't need validation. She simply turned, her chin high, her dignity intact, and walked off the ballroom floor with Daniel at her side. Every step was liberation. Every step was victory. But as the crowd erupted in whispers and cameras flashed, Ryan's eyes burned with fury. He had lost control tonight, but one thing was clear from the venom in his stare. He wasn't finished, and his next move would be darker than anyone could imagine. The gala ended in chaos. Guests scattered in hushed clusters, whispering about the scandal they had just witnessed. Phones buzzed with texts and photos. Ryan Mitchell, the man who prided himself on control, had lost everything in a single evening. Inside the limousine on the way back, Vanessa's fury exploded. "You told me she was pathetic," she snapped, ripping the diamond bracelet from her wrist and throwing it onto the floor. "You told me she was nothing, but she walked into that room tonight and made me look like a fool." Ryan's jaw tightened as he stared out the tinted window, his fists clenched. "Don't overreact," he muttered. "Overact?" Vanessa's voice rose into a shriek. "Every camera was on her. Every investor saw you tremble like a coward. Do you have any idea what this does to my family's reputation?" Ryan turned sharply, his eyes blazing. "Your family's reputation? You think they'll care about one woman's outburst? They'll forget in a week." But Vanessa wasn't convinced. She leaned back, her lips curling into a cold smile. "You don't get it, Ryan. My father doesn't forget. He doesn't forgive weakness, and tonight you showed the whole world that you're weak." The word struck him like a slap. For the first time, Ryan realized Vanessa might not be the ally he thought she was. In fact, she might be preparing to abandon him the way he once abandoned Emily. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat quietly in her small apartment. She had traded chandeliers and marble floors for peeling paint and flickering lights. But tonight, for the first time in months, she felt free. She had spoken her truth. She had faced Ryan, not with anger, but with strength. Daniel sat opposite her at the small kitchen table, his coat still draped over the chair. "You were extraordinary tonight," he said softly. Emily shook her head, exhaustion pulling at her features. "I was terrified." "And yet, you stood there," Daniel replied, his voice steady. "You didn't let him silence you. That's what matters." Emily glanced at her belly, resting her hand gently on it. "I had to. For the baby. They need to know their mother fought back." For a moment, silence settled between them. The hum of the old refrigerator was the only sound, but in that quiet something shifted. Emily realized she wasn't alone anymore. Not truly. Someone believed in her. Someone stood by her side. That realization was more powerful than any luxury Ryan could ever offer. But the night's events had consequences. By morning, Emily's name was splashed across tabloids. Ex-wife confronts mogul at gala, pregnant and defiant. Online forums buzzed with speculation. Was the baby Ryan's? Was Daniel secretly the father? Social media turned Emily into both a symbol of strength and a target of gossip. She tried not to read the comments, but a part of her couldn't resist. Some praised her courage, others mocked her. But none of it mattered as much as the message she received in the early hours of dawn. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number again. This time, the message was short, chilling. "You should have stayed quiet. You'll regret this." Emily's blood ran cold. She knew the threat was from Ryan. His pride was wounded, his empire shaking, and that made him dangerous. Daniel saw the look on her face as she set the phone down, her hands trembling. "What is it?" he asked. Emily swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's coming for me." Daniel's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening with resolve. He reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "Then we'll be ready for him." But deep down, Emily knew Ryan wasn't going to attack in the open. He was cunning, ruthless, and desperate. And the next strike he planned would not just threaten her dignity, it would threaten everything she held dear. Ryan Mitchell sat alone in his office long after midnight, the city skyline glittering beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Normally, that view filled him with pride, a reminder of how far he had come. Tonight, it mocked him. He could still hear the whispers from the gala, still see the way the crowd had looked at Emily with admiration, and at him with disgust. His empire was crumbling, not because of a business rival, but because of the woman he thought he had destroyed. Vanessa's words still stung. "My father doesn't forgive weakness." If Thomas Brooks pulled his support, Ryan's projects would collapse overnight. Investors were already calling, wanting reassurance. The press was circling like vultures, and all of it traced back to Emily, standing in that sapphire gown, daring to expose him. Ryan poured himself a glass of whiskey, his hands trembling with fury. "She thinks she can humiliate me," he muttered. "She thinks she can take everything I've built." But he wouldn't let her. He couldn't. Ryan Mitchell wasn't just going to survive. He was going to crush her. He began making calls. First, to a tabloid editor he had in his pocket. "I want everything you can dig up on Emily Carter," he ordered. "Her past, her finances, her family. Find dirt or invent it if you have to. I want the world to see her as a liar and a fraud." Next, he called a private investigator. "Follow her. Every move, every person she meets. I want photos, videos, whatever you find, bring it to me. She's hiding something, and I'll expose it." But Ryan's most dangerous move came with the third call. He contacted an old ally in city politics, a councilman he'd once bribed for a zoning permit. "I need leverage," Ryan said coldly. "Pull her school records, her employment files. Make her look unfit to teach. If she loses her job, she loses her stability. And then she'll come crawling back, begging for mercy." It wasn't enough for Ryan to silence Emily. He wanted her broken, desperate, stripped of every shred of dignity. He wanted her to feel the same humiliation he had felt at the gala, but multiplied 100 times. Yet beneath his fury, there was fear. What if the baby really was his? The thought gnawed at him. A child tied him to Emily forever. And if the public discovered the truth, his image as Vanessa's perfect partner would collapse completely. That fear twisted into obsession. "If the child is mine," he muttered into the dark office, "then it belongs to me. She won't raise it. She doesn't deserve to." Meanwhile, across town, Emily slept fitfully, unaware of the storm Ryan was summoning. Daniel had urged her to rest, promising to keep watch. But even Daniel didn't know how far Ryan was willing to go. By dawn, Ryan's plan was already in motion. Headlines appeared online. Emily Carter's troubled past, the teacher with secrets, grainy photos from her old neighborhood, twisted stories about her finances, exaggerated claims about her health, all of it designed to smear her. Parents at her school began whispering. The principal called, hesitant but firm, requesting a meeting to discuss her future. Emily stared at the article on her phone, her stomach dropping. She felt the walls closing in again. She had fought so hard to rise, and now Ryan was pulling her back into the shadows. But this time, she wasn't completely alone, because Daniel read the article too, and his jaw tightened with a cold, dangerous resolve. Ryan thought he was the only one who could play dirty. But soon, he would learn that Emily and Daniel together were far more powerful than he ever imagined. The article spread like wildfire. By mid-morning, Emily's phone buzzed with messages from colleagues, concerned parents, and even old friends. Headlines painted her as unstable, unfit to teach, a woman with a questionable past. Every word was a dagger. She sat at her kitchen table, the screen glowing in her trembling hands. Shame threatened to pull her back into the darkness she had only just escaped. But this time, something was different. This time, she wasn't facing it alone. Daniel stood by the window, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice calm but firm. "I want every legal resource on this, today, and prepare a statement. We're not letting her reputation be destroyed by fabricated lies." When he hung up, he crossed the room and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Emily, listen to me. This is Ryan's playbook. Attack, smear, control. But we're not going to let him win. Not now." Emily looked up, her eyes wet but fierce. "He's trying to take everything from me again. My job, my name, even this baby. I can't let him do it, Daniel. I won't." That fire in her voice was the spark Daniel had been waiting for. "Then we fight back," he said simply. The plan began with truth. Daniel's legal team drafted a press release backed by documents proving Emily's spotless teaching record, her dedication to students, and her community work. They released photos of her volunteering, testimonials from parents who praised her kindness and commitment. The narrative began to shift. Instead of a troubled teacher, Emily was portrayed as a devoted educator and a mother-to-be, standing strong against a powerful man's smear campaign. Next came visibility. Daniel arranged for Emily to attend a charity event, not as a guest in the shadows, but as an honoree for her contributions to children's education. Cameras flashed as she stood on stage, her gown elegant but modest, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She didn't have to say much. Her presence was enough. Reporters captured her grace, her quiet resilience, and headlines the next day read, "Emily Carter, from humiliation to hero." But Emily wasn't content to let others speak for her. At the event, when asked about the scandal, she finally raised her voice. "I will not be silenced by lies," she said firmly. "My only crime was believing in someone who betrayed me, but I will not let that betrayal define my future, or my child's." The room erupted in applause. For the first time, Emily felt the tide turning in her favor. Ryan, however, seethed. Watching the coverage from his penthouse, he smashed a glass against the wall. "She's twisting this against me," he roared. Vanessa, sitting across the room, only smirked. "Maybe she's smarter than you gave her credit for," she said coldly. Meanwhile, Daniel introduced Emily to allies she never expected. Journalists willing to expose Ryan's shady business deals, lawyers prepared to counter his every move, and community leaders eager to rally behind her. For years, Ryan had believed he was untouchable. Now, every crack in his empire was being dragged into the light. Late one night, after another meeting with Daniel's team, Emily stood by her apartment window, gazing at the city. For the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She felt powerful. She rested her hands on her belly and whispered, "We're going to be okay. Mommy's not afraid anymore." But just as hope filled her heart, her phone buzzed again. A new message. "If you keep this up, you'll lose more than your job. Consider this your last warning." Her breath caught. This wasn't just Ryan's anger. It was his desperation. And desperate men were dangerous. Emily had stepped onto the battlefield, and now the war was about to get deadly. Ryan Mitchell had always been ruthless, but desperation made him reckless. The more Emily rose, the more he felt his empire slipping through his fingers. Every news headline that praised her dignity was another nail in the coffin of the image he had built with Vanessa and her family. Investors were whispering. Vanessa's father was growing cold, his support uncertain, and Ryan knew exactly who to blame. Emily. She had humiliated him at the restaurant, destroyed him at the gala, and now she was turning public opinion against him. He could not afford to lose. Not to her. Not to the woman he had discarded. Late one evening, he sat in his penthouse, a half-empty bottle of whiskey at his side, rage boiling through his veins. He picked up the phone and made a call to his private investigator. "I don't want dirt anymore," he said through clenched teeth. "I want results. I want her silenced. Do you understand me?" The investigator hesitated. "Mitchell, that could—" "Do it," Ryan barked, slamming the phone down. The plan shifted from character assassination to intimidation. Ryan paid men to follow Emily, to shadow her late at night, to make her feel the walls closing in. Within days, Emily noticed the figures lingering near her building, the unfamiliar car parked across the street, the footsteps echoing behind her as she walked home. Fear clawed at her chest, but she refused to show weakness. Daniel noticed it too. One night, after walking her to her door, he caught sight of a man across the street who quickly ducked into the shadows. His jaw tightened, He's watching you, Daniel said. Ryan's getting desperate. Emily's hands shook as she locked the door behind them. What does he want from me? Daniel's voice was low, protective. Control. And when men like Ryan lose control, they lash out. But we won't let him win. Despite his reassurances, the threats escalated. Emily received another message, this time with a photo attached. Her walking into the school, her hand on her belly. The caption read, "Tick-tock. You're running out of time." Her blood ran cold. She clutched her stomach, terrified not for herself but for the child inside her. That night, Daniel insisted she stay at his penthouse for safety. "You're not going back there until we know you're secure," he said firmly. His home was vast, filled with security cameras and guards, a fortress compared to her fragile apartment. But Emily couldn't escape the feeling of being hunted. Meanwhile, Ryan's desperation deepened. Vanessa confronted him, her patience gone. "My father is furious," she snapped. "You've become a liability. Fix this mess or we're done." Ryan grabbed her wrist, his voice venomous. "Don't you dare walk away from me. You think I'll let her ruin everything? I made her, and I'll destroy her if I have to." But Vanessa yanked her arm free, her eyes icy. "No, Ryan. She's destroying you all by herself. And if you don't stop her soon, my father will." The words chilled him. He realized he wasn't just fighting Emily anymore. He was fighting to keep Vanessa's family from cutting him loose. So he decided on one final, brutal move. Late at night, Ryan's men cornered Emily on her way home from a prenatal appointment, grabbing her arm, their voices low and threatening. "You need to back off. Stop talking. Stop showing your face. Or next time, we won't just scare you." Emily's heart raced as she fought to pull free, terror flooding her veins. For the first time, she realized Ryan wasn't bluffing anymore. She stumbled back into the clinic, gasping for breath, clutching her stomach as the baby kicked in fright. Her tears blurred her vision. She had fought so hard to rise, but Ryan was willing to risk everything, even her child, to win. And Emily knew in that instant, if she didn't strike first, Ryan's desperation could destroy them both. The night Ryan's men cornered her outside the clinic changed everything. Emily had spent months trying to survive quietly, believing that if she stayed strong and dignified, the storm would eventually pass. But Ryan had crossed a line. His threats weren't just about reputation anymore. They were about her safety, and worse, the safety of her unborn child. She couldn't hide any longer. It was time to fight back. Daniel was the first to say it. Sitting across from her in his penthouse living room, his jaw tight with controlled anger, he told her what she already knew. "Ryan won't stop until you stop him," he said firmly. "And the only way to stop him is to take away the one thing he values most, his power." Emily's heart pounded. She had never seen herself as a warrior. But motherhood had changed her. Fear was no longer enough to keep her silent. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Daniel leaned forward, spreading out documents across the table. "Ryan's been hiding things, fraudulent deals, debts, bribes. My team has been digging for weeks, and we finally have enough to bring it all down. If we expose this, he won't just lose investors. He'll face criminal charges." Emily's eyes widened. "And Vanessa's family? Once they see proof?" Daniel said, "They'll cut him loose without hesitation. He'll be finished." It felt surreal. Just months ago, Emily had been a broken woman crying in a dim apartment. Now she was sitting with one of the city's most powerful men, planning the downfall of her ex-husband. But this wasn't about revenge alone. This was about justice. About protecting her child's future. They worked late into the night. Daniel's lawyers assembled files, timelines, and evidence. Emily contributed too, recalling Ryan's old habits, the late-night phone calls, the unexplained expenses. Every detail became a piece of the puzzle. She was no longer just a victim. She was part of the strategy to take him down. The next step was public exposure. Daniel arranged for a press conference, inviting journalists who had already begun questioning Ryan's sudden rise and unstable partnerships. Emily would stand beside Daniel, not as a broken ex-wife, but as a mother telling the truth. In the days leading up to it, Emily transformed once again. She practiced her statement, rehearsing every word until it was firm and unshakable. "I will not be silenced by threats," she said aloud in the mirror, her hand resting protectively on her belly. "I will not let my child grow up in fear of a man who abandoned us. The world needs to know who he really is. Daniel watched her progress with quiet pride. "You're stronger than you realize, Emily," he told her. "And once this is done, Ryan will never be able to touch you again." But Ryan wasn't blind. He sensed the storm coming. His investigator warned him that Emily and Daniel had been meeting with reporters. His paranoia deepened, his desperation growing with each passing day. One evening, Vanessa confronted him again. "They're circling Ryan. My father's already suspicious. If something comes out—" Ryan cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "Then I'll make sure Emily never speaks again." The press conference was set for the following week. Emily stood ready, her speech prepared, her courage intact. She knew this was her moment to finally take back everything Ryan had stolen. But the night before the conference, as she packed her notes and tried to calm her racing heart, she heard a noise at her door. A slow, deliberate knock. Her phone buzzed at the same time with a new message. "You won't live to see tomorrow." Emily froze, her blood running cold. The battle was about to begin, and Ryan was prepared to end it by any means necessary. The knock at the door was slow, deliberate, each rap echoing through Emily's small apartment like a warning. She froze in place, clutching her speech papers to her chest. Her phone vibrated again with the chilling message, "You won't live to see tomorrow." Her breath caught. The baby kicked inside her, as if sensing her fear. Emily's eyes darted to the clock. 10:47 p.m. Daniel had insisted she stay at his penthouse under security, but stubborn pride had brought her back to her own place to gather a few things. Now she regretted it. The knock grew louder, then silence. Emily crept toward the door, her heart pounding in her ears. Through the peephole she saw no one. The hallway was empty, dimly lit. She exhaled shakily, convincing herself it was paranoia, until she heard the faint scrape of metal against the lock. Someone was trying to break in. Panic surged through her veins. She grabbed her phone, dialing Daniel with trembling fingers. "Someone's here," she whispered. "They're trying to get in." "Stay calm," Daniel's voice commanded, steady even through her panic. "Don't open the door. I'm sending security right now. Lock yourself in the bedroom." But before she could move, the door rattled violently. Emily gasped and stumbled back, clutching her belly. The lock held, but only barely. She heard muffled voices on the other side, men speaking in low, urgent tones. She ran to the bedroom, shoving a chair under the handle, her body shaking uncontrollably. She pressed the phone to her ear, whispering, "Daniel, they're going to get in." "Hold on, I'm almost there," he said, his voice sharp with urgency. The apartment fell into eerie silence. Emily pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Seconds felt like hours. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow under the door made her heart race. Then, a crash. The front door splintered open. Heavy footsteps filled the apartment. Emily stifled a sob, covering her mouth with her hand. She could hear them searching, overturning furniture, opening doors. "Check the bedroom," one voice growled. She held her breath, praying for a miracle. Just as the doorknob twisted, headlights from outside flooded the window. Tires screeched to a halt. Shouts erupted in the hallway. "Freeze! Security!" Chaos followed. The men cursed and bolted for the fire escape, their footsteps retreating rapidly. Emily collapsed to the floor, sobbing with relief as the bedroom door burst open. Not from intruders this time, but from Daniel's security team. Moments later, Daniel himself rushed in, kneeling beside her. She clung to him, shaking violently. "They were going to kill me," she whispered. His arms tightened around her protectively. His voice was low but fierce. "Not while I'm breathing." Daniel helped her up carefully, his hands steady on her back. "You're not staying here another night. This place isn't safe. From now on, you're under full protection." As they left the apartment, Emily glanced back at the wreckage. The shattered door, the overturned furniture, the life she had fought so hard to keep normal. It was gone now. Ryan had crossed the line from manipulation to violence. Emily wiped her tears, her expression hardening. "He tried to silence me," she said through clenched teeth. "But tomorrow, I will speak louder than ever." Daniel nodded. "Then we'll make sure the whole world listens." But what Emily didn't know was that Ryan wasn't finished. The failed break-in had only deepened his madness. And by the time she stood at that press conference, Ryan would be ready with a counterstrike so shocking it could destroy everything she and Daniel had planned. The rain came down in heavy sheets, blurring the yellow lights of the city. Caroline Dawson clutched her belly as another contraction ripped through her. Her phone slipped in her trembling hand. She had called Robert 5 times. No answer. She had texted him, "It's time. Please come. I need you." The little screen glowed back in silence. Her breath came ragged. She was 9 months pregnant, alone in the apartment she once believed was a home filled with love. Tonight it felt like a cage. Robert, her husband, had promised he would never leave her side when the moment came. But where was he now? The truth burned in her chest. He was hundreds of miles away, sipping champagne with Vanessa, the woman who had stolen both his loyalty and his conscience. Caroline slid on her coat, though her body ached. Her bag was already packed by the door. Baby clothes, a blanket, a small stuffed bear she had bought in a flea market when she still dreamed of a happy family. She grabbed it, leaned against the wall for support, and dialed for a taxi. The dispatcher's voice was calm, routine. "Pickup address?" Caroline's voice cracked as she gave it. For a moment she almost confessed, "I'm about to give birth alone. Please tell me I'll make it." But she swallowed the words. Too proud, too broken. Minutes later, headlights splashed across the street outside. The cab driver rushed to help her in, but she waved him off, forcing a smile. Inside the car, every bump in the road felt like knives twisting inside her. She whispered to the baby, "Hold on, just hold on a little longer." In the silence, Caroline imagined what Robert was doing. He was probably laughing at Vanessa's jokes, their glasses clinking over an ocean view. She could almost hear his voice, smooth and careless, telling Vanessa that Caroline was too fragile, too needy. The betrayal stung worse than the contractions. The hospital lights finally came into view. Relief washed over her, but the fear remained. She didn't have Robert to sign the admission papers, no one to hold her hand, no one to shout encouragement. Just Caroline and her child against the storm. At the front desk, the nurse's smile faded when she saw the sweat dripping down Caroline's face. "We need to get her inside now," she barked to the staff. Caroline felt herself being wheeled through long, sterile corridors, voices shouting medical terms she couldn't follow. Her mind blurred, and in that blur, she pictured Robert's face. Not as the man he was tonight, but as the man he had once been. The one who swore eternal love on their wedding day. The one who whispered dreams of a future filled with laughter. How quickly that dream had turned to ash. A sudden pain tore through her again. The nurse leaned close. "Breathe, sweetheart. You're not alone here." But Caroline knew, deep in her heart, she was. And at that exact moment, while Caroline was being rushed into the delivery room, Robert raised a toast with Vanessa at a luxury resort, completely unaware that his wife's life was hanging by a thread. The wheels of the gurney rattled against the polished hospital floor as Caroline Dawson was rushed through the corridor. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, every gasp of air feeling like a battle. The fluorescent lights above blurred into streaks as tears filled her eyes. She heard fragments of voices, blood pressure dropping, "Get Dr. Hayes, prep the delivery room." None of them sounded real. All she could think was, "I'm alone. I'm completely alone." The doors to the delivery room swung open with a metallic clang. The nurses moved with trained precision, lifting Caroline onto the operating table. The air smelled of antiseptic, cold and sharp. A doctor leaned over her. "Caroline, I'm Dr. Ethan Hayes. You're in good hands. I need you to stay with me." His voice was calm, steady, but urgent. Her eyes widened at the name. Ethan, she knew that name. Once, years ago, back in college, Ethan had been the boy who carried her books, the boy who used to sketch her while she studied in the library. Now here he was, older, stronger, with the firm authority of a man who had faced life and death moments too many times to count. And he was the only one standing between her and the abyss. A sharp contraction tore through her body. Caroline screamed, clutching at the thin sheet beneath her. The nurse placed an oxygen mask over her face, urging her to breathe. She obeyed, gasping, fighting the rising panic. Somewhere deep in her heart, she still hoped Robert would burst through the doors, racing to her side. But the doors slammed shut behind her, locking the world out. And Robert? He was nowhere to be found. Far away in a glowing ballroom filled with chandeliers and music, Robert lifted his champagne flute. Vanessa leaned close, her lips grazing his ear. "To us," she whispered, her perfume intoxicating. The crowd laughed, Glasses clinked. Robert smiled, basking in the attention. His phone buzzed once more in his pocket. He ignored it, shoving it deeper into his tuxedo jacket. He never saw the word flashing on the screen. Critical condition. Back in the delivery room, Dr. Hayes barked orders. She's bleeding more than normal. Get 2 units of O negative now. The nurses rushed. Caroline's vision dimmed at the edges. She tried to speak, but her lips trembled without sound. Fear strangled her. This wasn't supposed to happen. Childbirth was supposed to be hard but beautiful, filled with love and support. Instead, it felt like a battlefield, and she was losing. "Stay with me, Caroline," Ethan urged, gripping her hand. His eyes locked on hers, fierce and unwavering. "You are not leaving this child. Do you hear me? You fight." Her tears slid sideways across her face, wetting the pillow. She thought of the tiny onesie folded in her hospital bag. She thought of the baby's first cry she hadn't heard yet. She thought of raising this child with no father at her side. Strength, raw and primal, surged up from deep within her. The beeping of the monitor spiked. "We've got deceleration," a nurse shouted. The room exploded into controlled chaos. Ethan's jaw tightened. "We need to move to emergency measures now." Caroline's heart pounded against the edge of consciousness. She wanted to scream Robert's name, but what would be the point? He wasn't there. He had chosen another life, another woman, while she lay here dying to bring his child into the world. Her body shook violently. The nurse wiped sweat from her brow. "You're strong, Caroline. Your baby is almost here." And then, in that moment of unbearable pain, Caroline's world narrowed to a single truth. She might not survive this night. And as the delivery room filled with frantic voices, champagne glasses clinked across town, Robert laughing with Vanessa, unaware that his wife was slipping closer to death with every heartbeat. The hospital was quiet except for the urgent rhythm of machines. Caroline drifted in and out of consciousness, her hand limp in Dr. Ethan Hayes' grasp. Blood pressure low, pulse erratic, every number flashing on the monitor told him the same thing. She was teetering on the edge. Ethan knew she needed more than medicine. She needed the one person who was supposed to stand by her tonight. At 3 a.m., Ethan pulled off his gloves, grabbed the hospital phone, and dialed Robert Dawson's number. His voice, usually calm in crisis, carried a rare edge of fury. When Robert answered, his tone was slurred with whine and annoyance. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" "Yes, I do," Ethan shot back. "It's the time your wife is fighting for her life after giving birth to your child. She lost a dangerous amount of blood. She almost died tonight." There was silence, broken only by distant music spilling from wherever Robert was. Then a careless laugh. "She always exaggerates. Caroline's dramatic like that. I'm sure she'll be fine. Doctors love to scare people." Ethan's knuckles whitened around the receiver. "Listen to me carefully, Robert. If you care at all about her or about the child, you will get here now. I don't care if you have to fly, crawl, or beg a ride. Your wife could have been dead by now. And you weren't even here to sign the consent form. You left her completely alone." For the first time, Robert's voice faltered. She's really that bad?" "She was minutes away from bleeding out," Ethan said, his voice cold steel. "You should be on your knees thanking her for surviving." But Robert wasn't in a hospital. He was standing on a balcony overlooking the ocean. Vanessa draped herself over his shoulder, her manicured fingers tracing circles on his chest. She whispered just loud enough for Ethan to hear through the phone. "Tell them you'll come later. The baby isn't even yours." "Not really." Ethan froze at the voice. Vanessa? He had seen her once in tabloid photos, always glued to Robert's side. His jaw clenched. "Is that your mistress, Robert? While your wife is fighting for her life, you're standing there with another woman?" Robert cleared his throat, defensive. "Look, this isn't the time to judge me. Caroline's strong. She'll make it. I'll visit her tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Ethan hissed. "She needed you yesterday. Every woman deserves support when she brings a child into this world, but you chose cocktails and lies. If she doesn't wake up in the morning, it's on you." For a heartbeat, guilt pierced Robert's haze. He thought of Caroline's last text. "It's time. Please come. I need you." He had brushed it aside. Now the words replayed in his head with a weight he couldn't shake. But Vanessa tightened her grip on him, her lips brushing his ear. "Don't let them guilt you. She'll survive. She always does. Stay with me, Robert. You belong here." And Robert, weak, selfish, and desperate to preserve the illusion of his perfect escape, chose silence. "I'll be there tomorrow," he muttered and hung up. Ethan stared at the deadline in disbelief, his pulse pounding with rage. He looked at Caroline, pale and fragile on the bed, a mother who had just given everything to bring new life. And the man who vowed to protect her had abandoned her yet again. Ethan whispered fiercely, "You're not alone, Caroline, not as long as I'm here." But in another part of the city, Vanessa smiled in triumph, certain that Robert was hers completely, unaware that one devastating secret was about to unravel their entire world. The delivery room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped erratically, filling the air with an urgent rhythm. Caroline's body convulsed as another wave of pain coursed through her. The sheets beneath her were already stained crimson. The nurses worked quickly, their voices sharp and clipped, but even through the haze of exhaustion, Caroline understood one terrifying word: hemorrhage. Her heart raced as though trying to outrun the truth. She was bleeding too much. Her body was betraying her at the very moment it was supposed to bring life. A cold chill seeped into her bones, even as sweat drenched her skin. Her lips trembled, forming words no one could hear. "Please, don't let me die." Dr. Ethan Hayes pressed gauze firmly against the wound, his expression grim but controlled. "Stay with me, Caroline," he urged, his eyes locking on hers. "You're stronger than this. I'm not letting you go." Her vision flickered in and out. She remembered fragments of her life, her first date with Robert, the wedding vows he spoke so smoothly, the nights she stayed up dreaming of a family. All those promises had led her here, alone, with death whispering in her ear. A sob caught in her throat. She didn't want her child to grow up motherless. Pressure dropping fast, a nurse shouted. The monitor's alarm wailed. Ethan barked, "Get the surgical kit and page the blood bank, now." Caroline's hand reached blindly across the bed. Ethan caught it, holding tight. His grip was warm, firm, a lifeline pulling her back from the edge. "I've got you," he whispered fiercely. "Don't give up. Your baby needs you. You've come too far to stop now." Her tears slid silently. She wanted to believe him, wanted to fight, but the darkness pulled stronger. She thought of the baby's tiny chest rising and falling, of lullabies she hadn't yet sung. She thought of her father, who would break if he lost his daughter tonight. The thought gave her the will to take one more breath. Meanwhile, across town, the music at the resort swelled with laughter and clinking glasses. Robert Dawson leaned back in his chair. Vanessa curled beside him, their hands entwined as if they belonged in some glamorous fairy tale. He didn't know, or didn't care, that his wife was battling for her life, drenched in blood instead of champagne. Vanessa tilted her head, watching him with a sly smile. "Forget about her. You're free now. With me, you can finally breathe." Robert raised his glass. The words "to us" left his lips just as Caroline's monitor flatlined for a fraction of a second. Ethan reacted instantly. "Start compressions." His hands pressed rhythmically against Caroline's chest, his face tight with determination. The room pulsed with urgency. Suction, clamps, nurses moving in a blur. The minutes stretched, each one a lifetime. "Come on, Caroline," Ethan muttered under his breath. "Come back to us. Come back to your baby." And then, finally, a faint, fragile cry pierced the chaos. The baby had arrived. A nurse lifted the tiny infant, its skin flushed and wrinkled, its cries desperate but alive. Caroline, weak and fading, turned her head toward the sound. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "My baby," she whispered. Ethan placed the newborn against her chest. For a fleeting moment, warmth replaced the cold, despair gave way to love. Caroline's trembling arms wrapped around her child. Tears streaked her cheeks, not of pain this time, but of fierce devotion. But the danger wasn't over. The bleeding hadn't stopped. The monitors still screamed warnings. Ethan knew he was running out of options. "Prep the OR," he ordered. "If we don't stop this hemorrhage, we'll lose her." And as Caroline clutched her baby with the last of her strength, Robert clutched a champagne flute with Vanessa, completely blind to the fact that his wife was one heartbeat away from leaving this world forever. The piercing wail of a newborn cut through the tension like lightning, splitting a storm. For one blessed second, the chaos in the delivery room froze. Nurses glanced at each other with teary relief. Dr. Ethan Hayes let out a sharp breath, the lines of strain easing just slightly from his face. The child was alive. Against all odds, Caroline's baby had come into the world. A nurse swaddled the tiny boy in a soft blanket, rushing him over, his fists clenched, his cries fierce, as if he were demanding the world notice his arrival. Caroline's eyelids fluttered open, heavy with exhaustion. When they placed the infant against her chest, tears spilled down her cheeks. "My baby," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She touched the boy's cheek with trembling fingers, the warmth of life grounding her in this nightmare. For a fleeting moment, she forgot the blood, the fear, the absence of the man who should have been holding her hand. There was only love. Ethan watched the fragile scene, his chest tightening. He had delivered hundreds of babies, witnessed countless first cries, but this moment struck him differently. Maybe it was the way Caroline looked, broken yet unyielding, clinging to her son with every ounce of strength left in her. Or maybe it was the knowledge that Robert, the child's father, had abandoned her for another woman. Whatever it was, Ethan felt a surge of protectiveness burn inside him. The spell broke when a nurse called urgently, "Doctor, she's still losing blood." Ethan's expression hardened. "Get her to the OR. Now." Caroline's body trembled as they began to wheel her toward surgery. She clutched her baby tighter, unwilling to let go. Her eyes darted to Ethan, wide with fear. Don't take him from me, please." Ethan leaned down, his voice steady. "Your baby is safe, Caroline, but I need to save you now. Trust me." Her grip loosened reluctantly. The nurse lifted the infant from her arms, carrying him to the incubator. The baby's cries grew louder, echoing through the sterile room like a protest against the injustice. Caroline reached out, fingers stretching toward her child, even as she was wheeled away, tears blurring her vision. Meanwhile, across the city, the sounds were very different. Music swelled in the luxury resort's ballroom. Robert Dawson clinked glasses with investors, Vanessa beaming at his side. He laughed, unaware of the newborn's cry, unaware that his wife's life was still slipping away. He was basking in admiration, the kind of shallow applause that fed his pride but hollowed his soul. "Someday," Vanessa purred into his ear, "we'll have a baby of our own, one that's truly ours." Robert smirked, the idea pleasing his ego, but her words planted an unease he couldn't quite name. For a split second, Caroline's text flashed through his mind again. "It's time. Please come." He shook it off with another sip of champagne. Back at the hospital, Caroline's body grew weaker. Her breaths came shallow, her skin pale against the white sheets. The OR doors loomed ahead. Nurses spoke in clipped voices, preparing instruments, bags of blood hanging ready. Ethan stayed at her side, gripping her hand. "Stay awake, Caroline. Think of your baby's cry. That sound means you both have a future. Don't give up now." Her lips moved, barely forming words. "Promise?" "Promise you'll protect him." Ethan swallowed hard, his voice firm. "With my life." The OR doors slammed open. The team rushed inside. The baby's wails echoed faintly down the hall, haunting, desperate, a fragile tether between mother and child. And as the first cry of her son lingered in the sterile air, Caroline closed her eyes, unsure if she would ever open them again, while Robert lifted a toast to a future that was already crumbling beneath him. The sun rose over the city, but for Caroline Dawson, the world was still dark. She lay unconscious in the recovery room, her body drained after surgery. Tubes snaked across her arms, machines whispered steady rhythms, and beside her crib, her newborn slept peacefully. The hospital was a place of healing, but for Caroline, it was also a place of betrayal. Robert still hadn't arrived. Instead, his face filled phone screens across the country. Sometime in the night, photos had leaked onto social media. A series of glossy shots showed Robert Dawson at a luxury resort, arm wrapped tightly around Vanessa Moore. In one, they toasted with champagne, his grin wide, hers smug. In another, they lounged on the beach, his hand resting intimately on her thigh. The caption read, "While his pregnant wife struggled alone, billionaire Robert Dawson enjoyed a midnight escape with his mistress." The internet exploded. Comments poured in like fire. How could a man abandon his wife at her most vulnerable? Money can't buy morals. Shame on him. That poor woman giving birth alone. My heart breaks for her. By morning, the hashtag Stand with Caroline and #Cancel Robert Dawson were trending worldwide. Investors who once admired Robert now distanced themselves. His company's stock dipped within hours. What should have been another victory lap for Robert turned into a public execution of his reputation. Vanessa scrolled through the backlash with narrowed eyes. "They'll forget in a week," she told him, brushing off the storm. "You're Robert Dawson. People love money and power. This will blow over." But Robert wasn't so sure. The phone in his hand buzzed non-stop with angry messages. His mother's furious voicemail, his father's cold disappointment, his board members demanding answers. For the first time in years, Robert felt something he hadn't known in his carefully curated life: fear. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, Caroline stirred awake. The first face she saw was not her husband's but Lily's, her best friend, eyes red from crying, clutching a bouquet of lilies. "Where's Robert?" Caroline croaked, her throat dry. Lily hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She showed Caroline the viral photos. Caroline's heart clenched. Her lips trembled, tears welling in her eyes. She had known Robert was unfaithful, had seen the warning signs, but seeing the evidence, public, undeniable, while she lay fragile and broken, was a knife through her soul. "He never came," Lily whispered. "Not last night, not this morning. Caroline, he chose her." A sob tore from Caroline's chest, shaking her weak body. She turned her face toward her baby's crib, gazing at the tiny boy who depended entirely on her. In that moment, grief gave way to something sharper: resolve. Robert might have abandoned her, but she would not abandon her child. Later that afternoon, a nurse entered with news. "The media's camped outside the hospital. They want a statement." Caroline shook her head. "No, not yet. I'm not strong enough." But Ethan Hayes, standing quietly at the corner, spoke gently. "Caroline, you don't have to face them now. Heal first. Gather your strength. The truth will wait. But when you're ready, it's your voice the world needs to hear." She nodded, clutching her baby close. Her eyes, though swollen with tears, held a flicker of determination. And while Caroline gathered strength for the battles ahead, Robert scrolled his phone in panic, unaware that one powerful ally was about to step into Caroline's life and shift the war entirely in her favor. Caroline Dawson sat propped against the hospital pillows, her newborn nestled in her arms. The baby's tiny breath steadied her heart, but her mind was restless. The world outside was roaring with judgment, anger, and pity. Inside, she was still weak, body trembling from blood loss. Every sound of footsteps in the hallway made her hope Robert had finally come. But the doorway remained empty. Instead, Dr. Ethan Hayes stepped inside. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of the night before. He checked the monitors, made quick notes on her chart, then turned to her with a softness that didn't match the chaos he had just survived. "You're stable for now," he said gently, "but you need rest, and you need support, real support." Caroline's lips quivered. "He never came, Ethan. I almost died, and Robert, he never came." Ethan pulled a chair closer, his voice low but firm. "I called him. I told him you were critical. Do you know what he said?" Caroline shook her head. "He said he'd come tomorrow. As if your life was just an appointment he could reschedule." The words sliced through her, but strangely, they also planted a seed. A final confirmation. The man she had built her life around no longer existed. All that remained was a selfish stranger. Tears streaked down her face, but Ethan leaned forward. "Caroline, you're not alone in this. Not anymore. I saw how he abandoned you. I saw how you fought, and I promise you this, I will stand beside you. Whatever battle is coming, you won't face it by yourself." Caroline blinked at him, startled. She had always known Ethan as a quiet memory from her past, a boy who once looked at her like she was the center of the world. Now here he was, a man offering strength when she had none left. Before she could respond, the door swung open. Lily entered, holding her phone. Her face was pale. "Caroline, it's worse. Robert's lawyers are already making statements. They're saying you're unstable, that you exaggerated your medical crisis, that you're not fit to raise the baby alone." Caroline clutched her child closer, her heart hammering. "They want to take him from me." Ethan stood, his voice sharp. "Over my dead body, I'll testify to every detail of last night, to your condition, to his absence, to how close you came to death. They want to drag you through the mud? Fine, but the truth is on your side, and I'll make sure the world hears it." Lily looked between them, hope flickering. "He's right, Caroline. You don't have to stay silent anymore. You have allies now. Me, your father, and Ethan. We'll build this case, piece by piece. He left you at your weakest, and that's something no court and no public will forgive." Caroline's tears dried. Her gaze hardened. For the first time since the baby's cry had filled the room, she felt more than grief. She felt resolve. She kissed her son's forehead. Then we fight. For him. For me. For the truth. Outside the hospital, cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Inside, a quiet storm was building. Caroline had nearly lost everything, but now she had something stronger than pain. She had purpose. And as Robert paced in his penthouse, Vanessa whispering poisonous reassurances in his ear, he had no idea that the very doctor who saved Caroline's life was about to expose a devastating truth that could destroy him completely. The hospital room was hushed except for the steady beeping of machines. Caroline Dawson rocked her newborn gently, the baby's soft cries calming into quiet breaths. Across from her, Dr. Ethan Hayes sat with a folder in his lap, his jaw tight. He had been debating for hours whether to tell her. But the moment Robert's legal team began painting Caroline as unstable, Ethan knew silence was no longer an option. "Caroline," he began carefully, "there's something you need to know, something that might change everything." Her eyes lifted, weary but alert. "What is it?" Ethan opened the folder. Medical records, lab results, documents stamped years ago. "I looked into Robert's medical history. He's been a patient at another clinic for years. Records show he underwent multiple treatments. The truth is, Robert has been medically infertile for a long time." Caroline blinked, stunned. "Infertile? But—" She looked down at her baby. Confusion twisted into disbelief. "That's impossible." Ethan's voice was steady. "Not for you. Remember last year? You confided once that Robert wanted a baby, but never came with you to the appointments. That's when you chose assisted conception. You never told him because you thought it would bruise his pride. Caroline, this child is yours entirely. Biologically, Robert could never have fathered him." Her breath caught, the truth hitting her like a tidal wave. She remembered those lonely visits to the clinic, the whispered prayers, the hope that motherhood might heal the cracks in her marriage. And Robert? He had played the loving husband only when it suited his image, never admitting he already knew the truth of his condition. Tears spilled from her eyes, but this time they weren't of weakness. They were of clarity. "So all this time, he let me believe. He let the world believe. And now he's trying to call me unfit?" Ethan leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "He's built his empire on lies. But this is one lie he can't escape. If he takes you to court, if he tries to claim this child, it will all come out. His reputation, his company, his empire. It will burn." Lily, who had been listening silently, gasped. "Caroline, don't you see? This is your shield. He can't touch you. If he pushes, we'll reveal everything." Caroline cradled her baby tighter, her mind spinning. Part of her wanted to scream, part of her wanted to laugh bitterly. The man who humiliated her, who abandoned her in her darkest hour, wasn't even capable of giving her the one thing he boasted about, a family. "Then let him try," she whispered fiercely. "Let him stand in court and point his finger at me. Because when the truth comes out, he'll have nothing left." Outside, the media storm was growing. Robert's company stock continued to plunge as headlines multiplied. Where was Robert Dawson during his wife's delivery? Photos of mistress spark outrage. Behind closed doors, Robert barked at his lawyers, demanding they crush Caroline before the public sympathy grew any stronger. But the lawyers exchanged uneasy glances. "Sir, if opposing counsel uncovers certain medical files, this could destroy everything." Robert's face drained of color. He knew exactly what they meant. He had hidden that truth for years. If Caroline found out, his empire would crumble overnight. And as Caroline held her child with new strength, Robert realized the lie he thought was buried forever was about to rise. And it was a secret powerful enough to end him. Caroline Dawson sat at the edge of her hospital bed, her baby resting in a bassinet beside her. The morning light filtered weakly through the blinds, but inside her heart, a fire had ignited. For days, she had been silent, too broken to answer the whispers of the world outside. But now, armed with the truth Ethan had revealed, she knew silence was no longer an option. Lily paced the room, phone in hand. "Caroline, the press is everywhere. They want your side. Right now, the public only knows Robert's lawyers calling you unstable. If you don't speak soon, he'll control the narrative." Caroline tightened her grip on her baby's blanket. She looked down at her son, so small, yet so strong. "Then I'll speak," she said firmly. "Not just for me, for him, for every woman who's ever been silenced." Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his expression one of both caution and admiration. If you go public, Caroline, there's no turning back. Robert will throw everything he has at you. Are you ready for that storm? She met his gaze, unflinching. He left me to die. He humiliated me. And now he wants to take my child. I'm not afraid of storms anymore. I already survived one. Lily's eyes lit with determination. Then let's do this. I'll set up a press conference. No spin, no manipulation, just you telling the truth. The next afternoon, the hospital lobby transformed into a battleground. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled for space, microphones thrust forward. Security formed a tight circle around Caroline as she walked slowly toward the podium, her father and Lily at her side, Ethan standing quietly in the background. She looked pale, still recovering, but her posture was straight, her eyes resolute. The murmurs died down as she adjusted the microphone. Her voice trembled at first but grew steadier with every word. I am Caroline Dawson. A few nights ago I gave birth to my son alone. I nearly lost my life while my husband chose to spend the night with another woman. That is the truth. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The cameras clicked furiously. Caroline drew a breath, steadying herself. I will not be shamed. I will not be silenced. And I will not allow anyone, husband, mistress, or lawyer, to call me unfit to raise my child. I am his mother, and I am enough. The lobby erupted in applause, not from reporters but from patients, nurses, even bystanders who had gathered. The live broadcast spread like wildfire across social media. Hashtags shifted. Sympathy turned to outrage. Outrage aimed squarely at Robert. At the penthouse across town, Robert watched the broadcast with his lawyers. His jaw tightened as Caroline's face filled the screen. Vanessa rolled her eyes. She's playing the victim. Don't worry, the public will forget. But the lawyers didn't look so confident. One muttered, if she pushes further, if she reveals what we're afraid of, you won't just lose public favor. You'll lose everything. Robert slammed his glass onto the table, wine spilling across polished wood. She wouldn't dare. But deep inside, fear clawed at him. Caroline was no longer the quiet wife who endured in silence. She was standing, speaking, fighting, and the world was listening. Back at the hospital, Caroline stepped away from the podium, her baby cradled in her arms. She whispered softly, "We'll be okay, my love. No one will take you from me." But even as the crowd cheered her courage, Robert was dialing a number in secret, summoning an ally who could strike back at Caroline in ways she never expected. Robert Dawson's penthouse was silent except for the ticking of a clock and the muffled hum of the city below. His phone buzzed with headlines, notifications, and angry emails. Caroline's press conference had shaken his world. His empire, built carefully over years, now looked like a tower of glass ready to shatter. Vanessa paced the room in her silk robe, her face tight with frustration. You can't let her control the story. She made you look like a monster. You have to hit her back harder. Robert's jaw flexed as he scrolled through the avalanche of criticism. Words like coward, abuser, traitor filled the screen. He slammed the phone down. Then we will hit her back. She wants a fight? I'll give her one she'll regret. The following morning, Caroline woke to the sound of her father's voice trembling as he read the headlines aloud. Robert Dawson claims wife mentally unstable, questions raised over baby's paternity. Caroline's blood ran cold. She snatched the tablet from his hands. Her husband's face filled the screen, smug and controlled as he stood before reporters. My wife has been struggling emotionally for years, Robert declared smoothly. While I sympathize, I must prioritize the safety of my child. Until her condition improves, I will be pursuing custody. Gasps filled the crowd in the footage. The implication was poisonous. He wasn't just calling her weak, he was calling her unfit. Lily stormed into the hospital room, phone in hand. He leaked sealed medical records, Caroline, fabricated ones. He paid a clinic to claim you had a breakdown after college. He's trying to erase your credibility before the court date. Caroline clutched her baby close, fury coursing through her veins. He'll lie about anything to win, even if it means destroying me completely. Ethan entered, his expression grim. It's worse. He's filed for an emergency hearing. If the judge believes his claims, he could get temporary custody until the trial. The room spun. Caroline's heart pounded. The thought of Robert, cold, selfish Robert, holding her baby, using him as a pawn, filled her with terror. Her father placed a strong, weathered hand on her shoulder. "You won't lose him. Not while I'm alive." But even as he spoke, Caroline's phone buzzed with a new message. No name, just a number. The text read, "If you keep pushing, more secrets will come out. Secrets you don't want the world to know." Caroline's hands shook. She looked at Lily, then Ethan. "He's threatening me. What more could he possibly have?" Ethan exchanged a look with Lily. "It's intimidation. He wants you scared, but you can't back down now." Caroline's tears burned hot. She'd endured betrayal, humiliation, nearly lost her life, and now Robert wanted to take her son, the only light left in her world. She stood, her body still weak but her spirit unyielding. "If he wants a war, he'll get one. He's forgotten who I am. I'm not just his wife, I'm a mother, and I will burn his lies to the ground." The baby stirred in her arms as if sensing his mother's resolve. Caroline kissed his forehead. But even as she spoke, Robert was meeting secretly with a ruthless ally, an investigator willing to dig into every corner of Caroline's past, prepared to uncover a twist so shocking it could destroy her in front of the entire world. Robert Dawson sat in the back of his black SUV, city lights flashing across his face. His jaw was clenched, his mind racing. Caroline had blindsided him with her press conference. Now public sympathy was with her, and his carefully crafted reputation was in ruins. He needed a weapon. A lethal one. Across from him sat Victor Kane, a man whispered about in courtrooms and feared by half the city's elite. An investigator who specialized in dirt, the kind of dirt that could bury anyone, no matter how clean they appeared. Robert leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Find me something on her? Anything. I don't care what it costs." Victor smirked, his scarred face illuminated by the glow of his tablet. "Everyone has secrets, Dawson. Wives, husbands, even saints. I'll dig until I find hers." Within hours, Victor had his team combing through Caroline's past. Old school records, medical files, financial statements, neighbors willing to whisper for cash. He dug where no one else dared. And finally, he struck gold. Or what he believed was gold. The following evening, Victor slid a manila folder across Robert's desk. "Your wife isn't the innocent angel the public thinks she is." Robert opened the folder. Inside were documents, hospital visits from years ago when Caroline had sought therapy for anxiety after her mother's sudden death. Nothing scandalous, nothing shameful, but Victor spun it like poison. With the right words, "This looks like evidence of mental instability. Combine that with the hemorrhage, we can argue she's unfit to raise a child alone." Robert's lips curled into a satisfied grin. "Perfect. The court will eat this up." But Victor wasn't done. He tapped the last page, his voice low. "There's more. Caroline's pregnancy. It didn't happen the way you think. These records suggest she underwent fertility treatments. She didn't conceive naturally, which raises a very simple, very dangerous question. Whose child is she raising?" Robert froze. His knuckles turned white against the folder. He had hidden his infertility for years, terrified of the humiliation. Now, the truth he had buried was clawing its way out. "No," he muttered. "She told me." Victor shrugged, cold and unbothered. "Maybe she told you what you wanted to hear. But the records don't lie. If this gets out, people will start asking questions, questions you won't want to answer." For the first time, Robert felt the ground beneath him crack. If the world learned he was infertile, his entire legacy as a powerful family man would crumble. Investors would abandon him. His enemies would circle like vultures. But then his pride hardened. No one can ever know this. Spin it. Make it about her. Say she cheated. Say she lied. Make her look like the traitor. Victor's smirk returned. "As you wish, but remember, when you play with fire, you don't always control where it spreads." Back at the hospital, Caroline sat with Lily and Ethan, unaware of the storm brewing. She fed her baby slowly, her eyes heavy but hopeful. She whispered promises into the child's ear. "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." Her peace shattered when Lily's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. "Caroline, oh my God, he's not just going after your stability, he's going after your son's paternity." Caroline's heart lurched. Her grip tightened on the baby. What? And in that instant, Caroline realized Robert wasn't just trying to destroy her. He was ready to weaponize the very secret she thought would never surface. The hospital room was quiet, a fragile peace hanging in the air. Caroline Dawson sat in the armchair by the window, rocking her newborn gently. Outside, the world still raged with hashtags and headlines, but inside, she found comfort in the steady rhythm of her son's breathing. That peace shattered when Lily burst through the door, phone clutched in her trembling hand. "Caroline, you need to see this." Caroline's stomach tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who was standing by the crib, and then reached for the phone. The screen lit with breaking news. Robert Dawson's team claims wife deceived him about the child's paternity. Her blood ran cold. Beneath the headline were Robert's words, captured on video at a press conference. "I've discovered deeply troubling evidence. My wife sought fertility treatments behind my back. She misled me, our families, and the public. This child may not even be mine. Until the truth is proven, I cannot trust her to raise him." The clip ended with Robert standing tall, Vanessa at his side, her arm linked with his. Caroline's world tilted. Her hands shook as she gripped the phone. He's saying my son isn't his? That I lied?" Lily's eyes blazed with fury. "He twisted everything. He knows about the fertility treatments, but instead of admitting his condition, he's painting you as the betrayer." Ethan stepped forward, his face hard with controlled anger. "This is reckless. He's gambling with the child's future just to save his pride." Caroline's chest ached. Memories flooded back. Those lonely clinic visits, the whispered encouragement from doctors, her desperate hope that a child might bring Robert closer to her. She had done it for love, for family, and now that love was weaponized against her. The baby stirred, letting out a small cry. Caroline clutched him to her chest, tears spilling freely. How dare he? How dare he use my son as a shield for his lies?" Ethan crouched beside her. "You can fight this. You have the truth. And you have me." Lily's phone buzzed again. She glanced down, her expression grim. "Caroline, it's worse. Social media is running with his version. People are calling you a liar, a cheater. They're saying you trapped him with another man's baby." Caroline's breath hitched, pain lancing through her. The world was turning against her, just when she needed strength the most. Her voice cracked. "I can't let my son grow up thinking he was unwanted, that he was a scandal." Ethan's voice was firm. "Then we expose him. We reveal the medical truth, the infertility, the treatments, everything." But Caroline hesitated. Her heart was torn. Revealing Robert's secret would destroy him, yes, but it would also expose her son's conception story to the world. Did she have the right to make her child's life a headline? Her father entered quietly then, carrying a cup of tea. He looked between their faces and understood instantly. He set the cup down and placed his rough, steady hand on Caroline's shoulder. "Daughter, sometimes the truth hurts. But lies, they poison everything. If you let him keep lying, he'll poison your boy's future. You do what you must to protect him." Caroline wiped her tears, strength returning to her eyes. "Then I won't stay silent anymore. If Robert wants war, I'll give him one." But as Caroline prepared to step into battle, Robert was already planning his next move. One so ruthless it could strip her of everything she loved in a single stroke. The courtroom was packed, cameras flashing outside the heavy oak doors. Inside, the tension was suffocating. Caroline Dawson sat at the plaintiff's table, Lily at her side, stacks of files neatly arranged. She clutched her baby's blanket in her lap, a silent reminder of what this fight was about. Across from her, Robert Dawson entered in a tailored suit, Vanessa trailing behind like a shadow, her smirk daring anyone to question her place. The judge called for silence. "This is a custody and fitness hearing. Both parties will be heard. Let us begin." Robert's lawyer, a slick man with a voice like oil, stood first. "Your Honor, my client seeks temporary custody to protect the child. Mrs. Dawson has a history of emotional instability, including documented therapy visits in her youth. And most concerning, she misled her husband about the conception of this child. We have evidence she underwent fertility treatments in secret. This raises grave concerns about paternity and her honesty." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Caroline's cheeks flushed with humiliation. She wanted to scream, to shout that she had done it for love, not betrayal. But Lily squeezed her hand, urging patience. When it was their turn, Lily rose, her voice sharp and clear. "Your Honor, what my colleague conveniently ignores is that Caroline sought therapy after her mother's death, a normal and healthy response to grief. To twist that into instability is not only cruel, it's dangerous. And as for the fertility treatments, yes, she pursued them, with Robert's knowledge, with his blessing. Because Robert Dawson has been medically infertile for years. He knew it. He hid it. And now he dares accuse the mother of this child of deception. Gasps filled the courtroom. Robert's face drained of color, his mask cracking. He slammed a hand on the table. "Lies!" he shouted. "She's lying!" The judge rapped his gavel. "Order! Mr. Dawson, control yourself." Lily continued, unshaken. "We have medical documentation, Your Honor. We also have a witness. Dr. Ethan Hayes, the attending physician during Mrs. Dawson's delivery. He can testify not only to her near-death experience caused by her husband's absence, but also to the medical truth Robert has denied." All eyes turned to Ethan as he stepped forward, sworn in, his voice steady. "It is true. Robert Dawson has a documented history of infertility treatments. Caroline's pregnancy was the result of medical assistance, which Robert was aware of. His accusations are not only false, they're an attempt to weaponize private information to cover his own shame." The room erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Robert's lawyer stammered, "Objection, Your Honor, this is irrelevant to custody." The judge leaned forward, eyes piercing. "What is relevant is whether this man has acted in good faith. So far, the evidence suggests he has not." "Continue." Caroline's chest swelled with hope. For the first time, the truth was no longer her burden alone. It was spoken aloud, undeniable. She glanced at her baby's picture tucked inside her folder and whispered silently, "We're winning." But Robert wasn't finished. His eyes burned with desperation and rage. He leaned close to his lawyer, whispering something that made the man blanch. The lawyer hesitated, then rose again. "Your Honor, if Mrs. Dawson insists on dragging private medical history into the light, then perhaps she would not mind if we reveal one more truth. A truth about her past that proves she is not the saint she pretends to be." Caroline froze. Her stomach twisted. What past? What truth? She searched her memory, panic flooding her veins. And as the judge ordered the lawyer to proceed, Caroline realized Robert was about to unleash a secret she never expected, one that could destroy her case in a single blow. The courtroom was so silent that the ticking clock above the judge's bench felt deafening. Caroline Dawson's heartbeat thundered in her ears as Robert's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. Every word that followed came like a dagger aimed straight at her. "Your Honor," the lawyer began smoothly, "while my client's infertility is unfortunate, it does not excuse deception. Mrs. Dawson has chosen to paint herself as a victim, but we have uncovered evidence that challenges her credibility entirely." He lifted a paper from his file and held it aloft. "Years ago, Mrs. Dawson was arrested for reckless endangerment. She caused a car accident while emotionally distraught, injuring herself and nearly injuring another driver. Though charges were later dismissed, the record exists. Is this the picture of stability we want raising an infant alone?" The gasp echoed through the room. Caroline's eyes widened in horror. Her hands trembled as memories she had buried clawed to the surface. She was 20 at the time, broken after her mother's sudden death. One night, she had driven through a rainstorm, blinded by tears. She lost control, skidding into a guardrail. No one else was hurt, but the police had charged her. The case was dismissed after therapy and community service. She had worked tirelessly to move forward, never imagining it would resurface now, weaponized against her in front of the world. Robert sat back, his lips curling into a smug smile. Vanessa squeezed his arm, her eyes glittering with satisfaction. Lily shot to her feet. "Objection! That case was dismissed. It has no relevance to her ability as a mother today." The lawyer smirked. "Objection or not, it speaks volumes about her judgment and emotional instability. Combine that with her secrecy about fertility treatments, and the pattern is clear. Mrs. Dawson is not fit to raise this child alone." The judge rapped his gavel for silence, his eyes narrowing. "Mrs. Dawson, how do you respond?" Caroline's throat tightened. Her mind screamed to defend herself, but shame gripped her like iron chains. The eyes of strangers bore into her, judging, dissecting her worth as a mother. She looked at her baby's photo lying on the table, her son's innocent face staring back. Tears welled in her eyes as she stood, her voice trembling but audible. "Yes, I was arrested. I was 20, grieving, and I made a mistake that could have cost me my life. But I learned. I healed. I built myself back up, and I will not let my worst moment define me forever, because I have something now that I didn't then. My son." and I would die before I let anyone hurt him." Her words rang through the room, strong despite the tremor. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the gallery. But Robert's lawyer wasn't finished. He leaned forward, voice dripping with venom. "Tell me, Mrs. Dawson, if you could lose control once, what's to stop you from losing control again? What happens when your baby cries all night, when the stress becomes too much? Will you drive recklessly with him in the car next time? Will you endanger him the way you endangered others?" The accusation sliced through her like a blade. Caroline's knees nearly buckled. But Ethan stepped forward from the witness stand, his voice cutting through the tension. "Enough. You're crucifying a woman for surviving grief. That doesn't make her unfit. It makes her human." The judge slammed his gavel again. "Order. This line of questioning will be limited, but the court will consider all evidence presented." Caroline sat, her chest heaving, her soul shaking. The truth had been twisted into a weapon, and as she fought to steady herself, Robert leaned back with a dark smile because he knew this was only the first of many weapons he planned to unleash against her. The courtroom buzzed with whispers after Robert's lawyer revealed Caroline's past. The gavel struck sharply. "Order," the judge barked, silencing the noise. "We will now hear from the medical witness, Dr. Ethan Hayes." Ethan rose from his seat, tall and composed, though his jaw was tight with restrained anger. He had watched Robert's lawyer twist Caroline's past into a weapon, watched her tremble under the weight of humiliation. But now it was his turn, and he intended to tell the truth. He placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat in the witness chair. The judge nodded. "Proceed." Robert's lawyer smirked. "Dr. Hayes, you were the attending physician at the birth, correct?" "Yes," Ethan answered firmly. "And you claim Mrs. Dawson nearly died. But isn't childbirth dangerous for many women? Isn't it possible you are exaggerating the situation to garner sympathy?" Ethan's eyes flashed. "No, sir. Caroline Dawson suffered a massive hemorrhage. She required immediate surgical intervention and blood transfusions. If I had arrived even 5 minutes later, she and the child could both be dead. That is not an exaggeration. That is fact." Gasps echoed across the courtroom. Caroline closed her eyes, remembering the terror of that night. The lawyer leaned in. "And where was my client, Mr. Dawson, during this alleged crisis?" Ethan's voice sharpened. "He was not there. I personally called him at 3 a.m., warning him that his wife's life was in danger. He refused to come. He chose to stay at a resort with another woman instead." The gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. Reporters scribbled furiously. Robert's face reddened as he slammed his fist against the table. "That's a lie," he shouted. The judge glared. "Mr. Dawson, one more outburst and I'll hold you in contempt." Ethan continued, unshaken. "I have the call records, Your Honor. They prove I contacted him that night, and his absence was not a mistake. It was a choice." Robert's lawyer tried to recover. "Doctor, with all due respect, your testimony seems unusually personal. Are you sure your feelings for Mrs. Dawson aren't influencing your words?" The insinuation hung heavy. Vanessa smirked from her seat, clearly enjoying the dig. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but full of conviction. "This isn't about feelings. This is about facts. Caroline Dawson is alive because she fought like hell to survive, and the man who should have been at her side abandoned her in the moment she needed him most. That's the truth, and I will stand by it under oath." Caroline's heart swelled with gratitude and fear. Ethan's words were bold, perhaps too bold, but they pierced through the lies Robert had wrapped himself in. The judge scribbled notes, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was silent, every ear tuned to the weight of Ethan's testimony. Robert's lawyer, desperate, tried one last attack. "Dr. Hayes, are you aware that your testimony could ruin a man's career, his reputation, his livelihood?" Ethan's gaze turned to Robert, unwavering. "If a reputation is built on lies and abandonment, then maybe it deserves to be ruined." The gallery erupted again, reporters nearly falling over themselves. The judge slammed his gavel. "Order! Order in the court!" Caroline clutched her baby's blanket, hope flickering in her chest for the first time in days. The truth was finally being spoken aloud, in a place where it mattered. But as the session ended, Robert leaned toward his lawyer, his expression dark and cold. "If they want war, I'll give them war. Release the footage." The day after Ethan's testimony, Caroline Dawson woke to a storm she hadn't seen coming. She had barely held her baby long enough to calm him before Lily rushed into the hospital room, her face pale, phone shaking in her hand. "Caroline, you need to see this," Lily whispered. Caroline's stomach dropped. She took the phone and pressed play. On the screen was grainy footage, clearly taken years ago. A younger Caroline was outside a clinic, her face streaked with tears. She was pacing, clutching her stomach, her words caught faintly on the audio. "I can't do this anymore. I don't want this." The video cut abruptly, but the damage was already done. Headlines blazed across the screen. Caroline Dawson considered abandoning motherhood. Is she stable enough to raise a child? Caroline's breath caught in her throat. This was years ago. After my miscarriage, I was broken. I didn't mean. Her voice trailed off, choked with grief. Ethan's jaw tightened as he stood behind her, fury flashing in his eyes. This is manipulation. They twisted your pain into ammunition. Lily scrolled through the endless comments flooding social media. They're running with it. Robert's team leaked it, I know it. People are calling you a liar, a danger, even unfit. Caroline's chest burned as if someone had poured acid into her veins. She remembered that day vividly, the heartbreak of losing a pregnancy, the crushing despair that made her question if she could ever survive motherhood. She had walked into that clinic for counseling, not to abandon life, but to find a reason to keep going. Now the world believed the worst version of her. Across town, Robert leaned back in his leather chair, sipping whiskey, watching the coverage unfold. Vanessa perched on the armrest, stroking his shoulder. See, now she's the unstable one. Now the world doubts her. Robert smirked, his ego fed by the chaos. Let her try to fight back. Every time she speaks, I'll bury her deeper. Back in the hospital, Caroline's father entered the room quietly, his weathered hands clenched in fists. He crossed a line. Using your grief against you? That's not a man. It's a coward. Caroline buried her face against her baby's soft head, tears soaking the blanket. How do I fight him when he controls the narrative, when he twists everything I've ever lived through? Ethan knelt beside her, his voice low but fierce. By telling the truth before he can. If he wants to weaponize your past, then we'll show it for what it really was. Not weakness, but survival. You fought your way through pain and you came out stronger. That's what the world needs to see. Lily nodded, determination sparking in her eyes. We'll hold another press conference. We'll bring the miscarriage records, the counseling notes, proof that you sought help, not escape. They want to shame you for seeking healing? Let's flip it. Show every woman watching that there's no shame in surviving grief. Caroline lifted her head, her tears drying into resolve. She looked at her son, his tiny fist curled around her finger. If I stay silent, he wins. If I speak, maybe I give hope to someone else who thinks she can't survive. No more shame, no more hiding. Her voice grew stronger. We fight back, again. But as Caroline prepared to step into the spotlight once more, Robert's team was already preparing their deadliest weapon yet, one that could drag another innocent person into the crossfire. Caroline Dawson thought she had seen Robert at his worst, abandoning her during childbirth, accusing her of betrayal, even leaking footage of her grief. But she hadn't seen the depth of his ruthlessness. Not yet. The morning news cycle struck like a bomb. Caroline was feeding her baby when the television in her hospital room blared with breaking headlines. Doctor Who testified for Caroline Dawson exposed in scandal. Caroline froze, the bottle slipping from her trembling hand. The screen filled with a photo of Dr. Ethan Hayes walking into the courthouse, but the headlines screamed another story. Affair between Caroline Dawson and her doctor? Her stomach dropped. No, she whispered. No, this can't be happening. Lily burst into the room, phone buzzing nonstop. They're accusing you and Ethan of having an affair behind Robert's back. Robert's team leaked messages, doctored messages, that make it look like you two were secretly together. Caroline's face burned with humiliation. Ethan had saved her life. He had stood by her in court. And now, Robert had twisted their loyalty into something sordid. They'll destroy him because of me, she whispered. Ethan arrived minutes later, his expression grim but steady. He dropped a stack of papers onto the table. These are fabricated. Timestamps don't match. But in the court of public opinion, it won't matter. They want people to believe you cheated on Robert with me, and that this baby is mine. Caroline's breath caught. Mine and yours? That's what they're saying? Ethan nodded solemnly. Robert wants to erase his infertility by pinning the child on me. If he convinces people, he walks away untarnished. And I lose my medical license for crossing a line. It's a win-win for him. Caroline's father slammed his fist against the table, his voice shaking with rage. That bastard will burn everyone just to save himself. The baby began to cry, sensing the tension. Caroline scooped him up, tears blurring her vision. She rocked him gently, whispering, "I'll protect you. I swear it." But her mind screamed in panic. Robert's lies were spreading faster than she could breathe. Social media was already ablaze. No wonder she didn't want a DNA test. The doctor is the real father. She trapped Robert. Her reputation was crumbling, Ethan's career teetered on the edge, and her baby's very identity was being shredded by public gossip. Lily slammed her phone down. "We can't let this stand. Ethan will file a defamation suit. Caroline will demand the fake messages be examined by a forensic expert. If we prove tampering, we can bury Robert in his own lies." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Caroline's shoulder. "I'll take the heat if I have to. Let them investigate me. I can survive it. But you and your son, you need to come out of this clean." Caroline's eyes filled with both gratitude and fury. "No, Ethan, he doesn't just want to destroy me anymore. He wants to destroy us. Everyone who stands beside me, I won't let him." Her voice hardened, her spine straightening. "If Robert wants to play dirty, then we'll bring the one thing he can't fight, irrefutable proof. His infertility records, the court files, everything he's tried to bury. We won't just defend ourselves, we'll expose him." The baby's cries quieted as Caroline kissed his forehead. For the first time, her fear transformed into something sharper: vengeance. But as she vowed to fight back with proof, Robert was already one step ahead, plotting to use the courtroom itself as the stage for his deadliest ambush yet. The second hearing drew an even bigger crowd than the first. Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse, microphones flashing, cameras rolling, eager for the next headline. Caroline Dawson held her baby tightly as she entered, Lily at her side, Ethan trailing close behind. She had expected another day of testimony. What she didn't expect was the ambush Robert had planned. The judge called the session to order. Robert sat tall in his chair, smugness radiating from his every move. Vanessa leaned forward, whispering in his ear with a smile that dripped with malice. Robert's lawyer stood, voice booming with false confidence. "Your Honor, before we proceed with further testimony, my client requests to present new evidence. Evidence that questions not only Mrs. Dawson's fitness as a mother, but also the credibility of her so-called allies." Caroline stiffened, her grip tightening on the blanket wrapped around her child. Lily leaned toward her, whispering, "He's setting a trap. Stay calm." The lawyer pressed a button on a remote. A projector flickered to life, filling the courtroom wall with video. Grainy footage appeared. Caroline's heart stopped. It was security camera footage from the hospital. Her in the delivery room, her body weak, clinging to Ethan's hand as he leaned close, whispering encouragement. But the audio had been manipulated. The words Ethan had spoken, "Stay with me, you're not alone," had been twisted into something else entirely. The distorted audio blared, "You're mine now. He'll never know the truth." Gasps exploded in the courtroom. Reporters scribbled, cameras flashed. Vanessa smirked, savoring every shocked expression. Caroline jumped to her feet. "That's a lie. That's not what he said." The judge slammed the gavel. "Order! Sit down, Mrs. Dawson." Ethan's face burned with fury. "Your Honor, this footage has been altered. I never said those words. I was saving her life. Anyone in that room can testify to it." Robert leaned back, feigning hurt. "You see, Your Honor? Not only did she deceive me, she's carrying on with another man under the guise of medical care. And this man conveniently testifies on her behalf." The lawyer pressed again, and another clip played. Photos of Ethan visiting Caroline's hospital room at night, holding the baby, smiling down at her. The narrative was clear. Robert was spinning their bond into an affair. Caroline's voice cracked, raw with anguish. "He saved my life. He saved my baby's life. That's not betrayal, that's humanity." But the courtroom was buzzing with whispers, poisoned by the manipulation. The judge rubbed his temples. "This court will require verification of this footage. Until then, its authenticity is questionable." But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Caroline collapsed back into her chair, clutching her child like a shield. Tears blurred her vision, but beneath the pain, anger began to simmer. Robert wasn't just trying to take her child. He was trying to erase her dignity, her truth, her very identity. Ethan leaned toward her, voice low. "Don't break Caroline. This is what he wants. But remember, we have the real truth, the records, the call logs, his infertility. We'll turn this trap against him." She nodded, though her heart pounded like thunder. And as the gavel struck to adjourn the day, Robert smirked coldly, because he knew his next move would be even deadlier, a revelation capable of ending Caroline's fight once and for all. The courtroom was tense as the final day of hearings began. Every seat was filled, every reporter's pen poised, every camera aimed at Caroline Dawson and her estranged husband Robert. The air was heavy, as if everyone knew something explosive was about to happen. Caroline sat upright, her baby in her father's arms a few rows back. She wore no makeup, no pretense, only the quiet strength of a woman who had survived betrayal, near death, and public humiliation. Beside her, Lily shuffled through documents, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ethan sat behind them, calm on the surface but ready to defend her with everything he had. Robert entered with Vanessa at his side, smug as ever, but there was a glint of desperation behind his eyes. He knew his empire was cracking. Today, he had one last chance to crush Caroline before the judge delivered a verdict. The judge called the court to order. "Mr. Dawson, your counsel may proceed." Robert's lawyer stood, his smile cold. "Your Honor, before you consider custody, there is one final piece of evidence we must present. Evidence that reveals the full extent of Mrs. Dawson's deception." Caroline's stomach clenched. Lily whispered, "Brace yourself." The lights dimmed. On the screen behind the lawyer appeared documents, emails, clinic notes, receipts. The lawyer's voice thundered. "These files show that Caroline Dawson not only pursued fertility treatments in secret, but she also selected an anonymous donor without her husband's knowledge. And Your Honor, we have reason to believe that donor was not anonymous at all." Gasps filled the room. Caroline's heart raced. "That's a lie," she shouted, but the judge silenced her with a raised hand. The lawyer pressed on, his words sharp as knives. "We present the possibility that Dr. Ethan Hayes, the very man testifying on her behalf, may in fact be the biological father of this child." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters jumped to their feet, cameras flashing. Vanessa smirked, whispering something gleeful into Robert's ear. Caroline's face burned hot, her throat tight. "No, that's impossible." Ethan stood, fury radiating from him. "This is slander. I have never been a donor for Caroline Dawson or any case connected to her. This is a fabrication." But the lawyer waved a paper in the air. "We have a witness from the clinic who claims Dr. Hayes was present during Caroline's treatment. Coincidence or conspiracy?" The judge rapped the gavel, trying to restore order. "Enough. This court will not descend into circus theatrics." But the seed had been planted. Whispers tore through the gallery like wildfire. Reporters murmured, "Doctor's the father?" Secret affair confirmed. Caroline's eyes filled with tears. Not because she believed Robert's lies, she knew the truth, but because the world outside the courtroom would devour this story. Her son's life, his very identity, was being dragged across headlines as entertainment. Ethan leaned close, his voice steady despite the storm. "Look at me, Caroline. You know the truth. I'll prove it. We can subpoena the clinic, run tests, whatever it takes. Don't let him win." She nodded faintly, but her hands trembled as she held her son tighter. This wasn't just about custody anymore. This was about her child's very existence being branded as scandal. The judge raised a hand. "This court will review all evidence before making a decision. Tomorrow, we will reconvene for the verdict." Caroline's knees nearly buckled. Tomorrow. One more night of waiting. One more night of uncertainty. And as Robert left the courtroom with a victorious smirk, Caroline whispered to her baby, "Hold on, my love. Tomorrow, everything changes, one way or another." The final day of court arrived with a gray sky pressing heavy over the city. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, cameras waiting to capture history. Inside, the air was thick with tension. It wasn't just about custody anymore. It was about truth, dignity, and survival. Caroline Dawson walked into the courtroom holding her baby close. Her father and Lily flanked her like shields, Ethan walking just behind. Her face was pale but resolute, her eyes carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every cruel headline, every betrayal. Across the aisle, Robert sat in his tailored suit, Vanessa at his side, smug as though the victory was already his. The judge entered, the gavel striking sharply. Court is in session. Today we deliver the ruling in Dawson v. Dawson. The silence was suffocating. Caroline's heart pounded, each beat a thunderclap in her chest. The judge began. This court has reviewed extensive evidence, medical records, witness testimony, and the character of both parties. Mr. Dawson accuses his wife of deception, instability, and infidelity, yet these claims have not been substantiated. Instead, we find repeated attempts to manipulate evidence, distort the truth, and publicly humiliate Mrs. Dawson. Robert shifted in his seat, his jaw tightening. Vanessa's smirk faltered. The judge's voice grew firmer. Records confirm Mr. Dawson's infertility, making his accusations of betrayal baseless. Evidence also shows that during a life-threatening medical crisis, he chose not to be present for his wife or child. This court cannot ignore such abandonment. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Caroline's hands trembled, tears brimming in her eyes. The judge turned to her. Mrs. Dawson, you are hereby granted full custody of your child. Mr. Dawson's request for custody is denied. Furthermore, given his conduct, this court will order a review of his fitness to retain guardianship rights at all. The gavel struck like thunder. This court stands adjourned. For a moment, Caroline couldn't breathe. The words washed over her like sunlight after a storm. Full custody. Safe. Free. Lily threw her arms around her, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." Her father's rough hands shook as he wiped away tears. "I knew you'd win, sweetheart. I knew." Ethan stood quietly, watching her with a soft smile. Caroline turned to him, her voice breaking. "Thank you for saving my life, for saving us." He shook his head gently. "You saved yourself, Caroline. I just reminded you how strong you already were." Across the aisle, Robert erupted in rage. "This isn't over. You can't take everything from me," he shouted, his voice cracking. But the reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing, their microphones recording every bitter word. Vanessa slipped from his side, her eyes darting nervously as the tide of public opinion turned. She had hitched her star to a sinking ship, and she knew it. Caroline stood, lifting her baby high, his small face peaceful against the chaos. The reporters outside cheered as she emerged from the courthouse, no longer the abandoned wife but the woman who had survived, fought, and won. She spoke into the microphones, her voice strong, steady, unforgettable. "This fight was never just about me. It was about every woman who has been silenced, shamed, or betrayed. We are not weak. We are not voiceless, and we will rise." The crowd erupted in applause, the hashtags flooding back across the internet. Stand with Caroline, Justice Won, Strength and Truth. That night, Caroline tucked her baby into his crib, the city lights glowing outside her window. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe without fear. She whispered to her son, her voice soft but fierce, "You will grow up loved, you will grow up safe, and you will never doubt your worth." And as Robert faced the ruins of his empire, Caroline Dawson stepped into a new chapter of her life. Stronger, freer, and no longer defined by his betrayal, but by her unbreakable strength. So that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You're still here with me until this very moment, aren't you? If you are, then something in Caroline's journey must have touched your heart in a way you can't quite put into words. And maybe that's the point. Stories like these remind us of truths we sometimes forget. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Caroline couldn't control her husband's betrayal, the lies, or the cruelty, but she could control her courage, her dignity, and the way she fought for her child. That's the essence of healing. Choosing how we rise when life tries to break us. Maybe you've felt abandoned. Maybe you've carried pain in silence. Remember, your past does not define you. Like Caroline, you can stand, fight, and rewrite the ending of your story. If this story reached your heart tonight, do me a small favor. Hit that like button, share this video so it can inspire someone else, and subscribe to our channel. Because together, we're not just watching stories, we're learning how to live them with strength.